who is the overall flight lead for SpaceX.
I just love the excitement of this crew. And this is a pretty cool view inside of Dragon. You can see the 4 seats for the 4 crew members, but Dragon's actually designed to have up to 7 crew members. So right below this row of seats, there can fit 3 additional seats. Today, since we only have 4 crew members, below the crew that you see on your screen is actually cargo stowed inside of Dragon.
Dragon, SpaceX, comm check.
SpaceX, Dragon, loud and clear.
Core, loud and clear. Ground station comm check is complete. Stand by for TDRS comm check.
We did have a good comm check with the core, standing by for the next comm check, which is going to be TDRS, and that's
Dragon, SpaceX, comm check.
SpaceX, Dragon, loud and clear.
Core, loud and clear. TDRS comm check is complete. Stand by for comm checks with DC, MD, and LD in the launch configuration.
Dragon, DC on countdown 1. Comm check.
DC, Dragon, loud and clear.
DC, loud and clear. Stand by for comm checks with MD.
Dragon, MD on countdown 1. Comm check.
MD, Dragon, loud and clear.
MD, loud and clear. Stand by for comm check over Dragon the ground. Dragon, MD, Dragon the ground. Comm check.
MD, Dragon, loud and clear.
MD, loud and clear. Stand by for comm checks with LD.
Dragon, LD on countdown 1. Comm check.
LD, Dragon, loud and clear.
LD, loud and clear. Stand by for comm check over Dragon to ground. Dragon, LD on Dragon to ground. Comm check.
LD, Dragon, loud and clear.
And LD, loud and clear. Let's go have some fun.
Dragon, SpaceX. Launch configuration comm checks are complete. Report when ready for seat rotation per section 2 of 4.100.
And now that we have successful comm checks, let's go over to the Johnson Space.
Dragon, we are ready for section 2 and ready for seat rotation.
Looks like the crew is getting ready for seat rotation, but let's head over to the Johnson Space Center in Houston, Texas, and check in with Shaniqua Vereen.
Thanks, Sandra, and welcome to the International Space Station Flight Control Room, or Mission Control Center, Houston. A team of flight controllers behind me is actively monitoring the space station as we speak. The crew in orbit has completed a number of tasks to prepare the station for Crew-5, like setting up tools to monitor Dragon's arrival and preparing the sleep stations for the new residents. Many of their clothes and other belongings launched on a previous cargo resupply mission. Back here in Houston, Flight Director Greg Whitney and his team are in constant communication with the SpaceX mission director for Crew-5's launch to the space station. Once we get into integrated operations, the NASA flight director will be conducting a series of go-no-go polls at the predetermined checkpoints for Dragon's approach. For now, we'll continue to follow along from here in Mission Control Houston, so I'll send it back down to the team in Kennedy. Over to you, Daryl.
All right, thank you, Shaniqua. And if you're just joining us, it is T-minus 2 hours and 19 minutes until Crew-5 launches as part of the NASA Commercial Crew Program. We've got Commander Nicole Mann, pilot Josh Cassada, and mission specialist Koichi Wakata and Anna Kikina. They are strapped into their seats inside Dragon Endurance. I'm Daryl Nail, and this is Bob Benkin, history-making astronaut here. If you want to get a question into Bob live on the show, just hop on to a social media platform, any of the following: Twitter, YouTube, and Twitch. We're streaming on Facebook as well. Use the hashtag AskNASA, and we will take your question live on the air to Bob Benkin. Now, the Commercial Crew Program has hundreds of super smart engineers and technicians doing amazing work to get us up to the station, and Megan Cruz is with one of them. Megan.
Yes, I do have a super smart engineer with me. This is Crystal Jones. She's with CCP's Grounds and Mission Operations Office. Crystal, can you tell everyone what that office is in charge of?
Sure, yeah. We have a wide range of functions that we do for the Commercial Crew Program. One is assessing ground systems for crew safety for both launch ops and recovery. An example of a ground system is the crew access arm, which we just saw the crew walk through to get to the spacecraft and ingress the spacecraft. That arm has to swing away from the vehicle for launch, but if there were some sort of emergency and the astronauts needed to get out of the spacecraft, that arm needs to come back really quickly to allow the astronauts to egress.
So you're responsible for just making sure that everything is operating the way that it should be if that were to happen?
Yes, correct.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then right after this, you're also going to go to the nearby Cape Canaveral Space Force Station. You're going to be inside a room there, and I believe we have a live shot of that room. And you're going to go there so that you can serve as CCP's mishap manager, right? This is the room right here.
Yes, that's correct. And I have my FAA and NTSB colleagues there with me as well. Since this is an FAA commercially licensed mission, they have mishap jurisdiction for some of the phases of flight, and so we all work together if an incident were to occur. I don't expect anything to happen. I have full confidence in the joint NASA and SpaceX team.
You have such an important role here, like you said, a wide variety of things that you're overseeing. You've been here at NASA for almost 15 years. I mean, did you know that you always wanted to work here, and how did you make it happen?
Yes, I did always know that I wanted to work at NASA. Ever since I was a very young girl, I dreamed of working for NASA. Unfortunately, when I was about 10, 11, 12, my parents' drug and alcohol use began to impact our lives in a severe way. We ended up homeless, had to stay in an abandoned bus, and eventually transitioned to a homeless shelter.
Wow.
After that time, we never seemed to be able to recover as a family. We lived in extreme poverty in a bad neighborhood, but it didn't stop me from trying to reach my goals. I still had that dream. So in high school, I learned how to use a computer. No one in my area had a computer. I didn't have one, didn't know. So learned how to use a computer, researched colleges, how to apply, how to get applications, the whole financial aid process.
Wow.
And I was accepted into Florida Institute of Technology here in Melbourne, Florida, and got a bachelor's in astrophysics and a master's in space systems.
Wow, you're not even at NASA, and you've had such a long road ahead of you, but I hope that people learn to take away from your story that really you can just follow your dreams if you have a passion for it to do it, right? That would be your message.
Yeah, and I'm happy to say that my parents have conquered their addictions. And I was extremely proud of my mom before her passing earlier this year. In fact, this necklace that I'm wearing is made with her ashes.
Wow.
And I wear it for every launch in her memory.
And I'm sure she's very proud of you. Crystal, thank you so much for being here.
Yeah.
We'll send it back to you guys.
Thank you so much, Megan. What a powerful story from Crystal Jones, the CCP Ground and Mission Operations Office. That is inspiring to hear how she came from that difficult background to where she is now.
Absolutely, Daryl.
And it's amazing too when you think about going through a difficult road like that and then achieving such a high level of accomplishment here at NASA. We're just So proud of Crystal Jones, and thank you, Crystal, for sharing that story with us. We want to introduce you now to today's crew. If you're just joining us now, as you're looking inside the capsule
Dragon,
Endurance.
you are go for Section 3 suit leak check preparation.
Dragon is a go for suit leak check preparation, Section 3 at 4.100.
And there you hear the confirmation that the crew is ready to begin their suit leak checks. Let's start off by talking about our commander for the day as they pull down their visors. She is the second from the right of your screen. Nicole Mann, the California native, holds a Master of Science in Mechanical Engineering. She is a colonel in the Marine Corps. She was an FA-18 Hornet and Super Hornet test pilot and deployed twice aboard aircraft carriers in support of combat operations in Iraq and Afghanistan. Nicole was selected by NASA in June of 2013, and in the years that followed, led the astronaut corps in the development of hardware in the Artemis program. Today, the Crew-5 commander will be flying into space for the first time. And after Crew-5 launches, she will be the first Native American woman to go to space, which is a wonderful accomplishment.
Absolutely. Nicole joined the astronaut office when I was the chief of the astronaut office. I'm just super excited to see a colonel in the Marine Corps head to the International Space Station from that commander seat, just like we had for Demo 2.
And you being a colonel in the Air Force, I'm sure you appreciate the military discipline that she brings to that role, just like your partner, Doug Hurley, brought a little bit of that. Sitting next to Nicole is Josh Cassada. He grew up in Bear Lake, Minnesota. The physicist and U.S. Navy test pilot flew 23 combat missions. He later became an instructor at the U.S. Naval Test Pilot School.
Dragon, we have tear complete and complete with Section 3.
There you hear the call that the leak checks have been completed. Good sign as we move forward. And I believe that was Josh Cassidy that came over the line there, who we are talking about.
Copy that, Dragon. You are go for Section 4 suit leak check.
That was a confirmation, rather, that they were to begin the suit leak checks,
Copy,
right?
Dragon is go for suit leak check, Section 4.
All right, want to correct that. Cassada, he's one of more than 100 graduates who became astronauts going back to the Mercury program. More recently, he served as capsule communicator in mission control. But Bob, today he's in the position of pilot aboard Dragon, and that's a position you know well.
Yes, it's exciting to see Josh in that seat. You know, as all of our astronauts who come into the program, he brings a balance of operational and scientific expertise kind of to the mission in front of him.
In the role of mission specialist is veteran Japanese astronaut Koichi Wakata. He has a doctorate in aerospace engineering, and in 1996 became the first Japanese mission specialist aboard the Space Shuttle Endeavour for STS-72. Altogether, Koichi flew 4 space shuttle missions, a Russian Soyuz, and was on a long-duration stay aboard the International Space Station. During his 2-decade career as an astronaut, Koichi has spent 11 months in space, and so he is the guy with the experience on this crew, the other 3 first-time flyers. Joining Koichi in the role of mission specialist is Roscosmos cosmonaut Anna Kikina. She graduated from the Novosibirsk State Academy of Water Transport in 2006. In 2012, Anna officially became a candidate for the position of test cosmonaut. Crew-5 will be Anna's first flight into space. Now let's check in with our team out at Hawthorne, California. Kate Tice, what do you have?
Thanks, Daryl. I'm following along with the launch countdown and our procedures. We're now coming up to T-minus 2 hours and 10 minutes. As you can see there on your screen, the crew is ready for leak checks. Those should be commencing any moment now. The countdown is proceeding nominally at this point on board the brand new Dragon spacecraft Endurance. We've already heard those communication checks between the Dragon team and the crew. We will hear checks, comm checks. So I'm hearing there's about a minute remaining in that leak check. There will be another communication check with the Falcon 9 launch team and the crew that comes up at about T-minus 2 hours. So at this point, we're in the leak check, less than a minute remaining. And after that, we'll be able to say leak checks are hopefully good. And at that point, the closeout lead will then verify that the cabin environments inside Dragon are good to go, and then begin procedures to close the side hatch of the Dragon spacecraft. So that's always an exciting moment. Of course, the closeout team will perform the final leak check on the hatch, and then once that is finished, the team will begin all their steps to ready the crew access arm for retraction, and then the closeout team will leave the pad at about T-1 hour, and we'll hear that called out on the nets that the team has departed the pad. And at that point in time, only our Crew-5 astronauts will remain on the pad. Now, as for Falcon 9, that team is on console in firing room 4. They are preparing for their communication checks, which will occur at T-1 hour and 55 minutes. SpaceX engineers have pressurized the launch vehicle gas storage bottles. Those are composite overwrap pressure vessels, or COPVs. They contain gases that are used to fill tanks with hot helium as propellant is that are filled with propellant, filled with hot helium as propellant is drained out of the first and second stages.
We saw the same. Stand by while we just confirm those results long term, and then for next actions.
Dragon copies and standing by.
So as the propellant is drained out of the first and second stages, we'll top those off in the last half hour or so before liftoff, those COPVs. Now, we also use pressurized gases to spin the Merlin engine turbo pump when we start an engine in space. The second stage MVAC engine starts up after the first stage separates, and then the first stage engines need to be restarted for that landing sequence. The gases are also used for attitude control systems, which help the vehicle with its orientation for deploying the grid fins and landing legs. Now, of course, we're continuing to keep an eye on the weather. You can see it remains a beautiful day at Pad 39A. We are watching weather at the launch site as well as around the world for contingency abort and landing zones.
And Dragon SpaceX for suit leak checks.
And it sounds like we're going to get confirmation of those leak checks now.
Go ahead, SpaceX.
All right, Josh. We saw you come in a little bit lower than you did on dry dress, so just as a measure of precaution, we're going to have the closeout lead come in and just take a quick look and double check that everything is looking secure for zippers and umbilicals. How copy?
We copy, and we were thinking the same. Thanks a lot.
Good read.
All right, so it sounds like pilot Josh Cassada, his suit pressure is a little bit lower than what we read during the dry dress, which was the basically dress rehearsal that we performed early on Sunday, October 2nd. So the closeout team is going to come back in and just make sure that all of the zippers on the spacesuit are zipped up to the appropriate height, just make sure that everything is locked into place. So we have plenty of margin in the launch countdown. The countdown is to make sure that all the teams are working toward T0 in a coordinated fashion, and we have lots of margin built in. So we are okay to go in and recheck that and reperform that suit leak check on Josh. So at this point in time, everything continues to be acceptable for launch. We're coming up to T-2 hours and 6 minutes. So I'm going to toss it back to Daryl over at Kennedy Space Center.
All right, thank you, Kate. And I'm here with Bob Binkin, astronaut from Demo 2 and NASA's first mission. And we want to talk a little bit about that leak check. Bob, you were following along as they were doing the checks. A crew now going inside to double check Josh Cassada's suit. What's that all about?
Yeah, that's correct, Daryl. You know, we heard the words from the SpaceX team. What they saw was a slightly different indication than they saw during Josh's last leak check, and the team is just going to double check that to make sure that they don't see anything awry. Just abundance of caution. As you heard, the crew reported that they had a good leak check, and so the team's just using, again, an abundance of caution.
And a little bit of air obviously comes through that suit and goes out the suit, right? So this is a level that would be maybe a little higher than what they normally see.
That's correct.
All right, very good. Well, we're back here at Kennedy, and the weather is beautiful for launch as we stand by. And there you can see the suit tech in there examining the zippers and the connection points in Josh Cassada's suit. So they hadn't shut the hatch yet, so that was an easy entry for that tech to go in there and check on that.
Yeah, so they'll check each of the places where there could possibly be a leak. One of the places is that umbilical that you've seen them disconnect, and they're now reattaching after they checked the seal that was there. They'll verify the zippers that are on the suit to make sure that those are all closed all the way to the very end. And I know that for the crew, these sorts of situations can be a little bit frustrating. They can kind of break the sequence of events, but I know they'll get right back on track here and continue.
Right, these are highly trained astronauts that have been getting ready for this moment for the past couple of years, certainly ready for all situations that they may come up against. And these suits, Bob, carry a lot right into the spacecraft.
Dragon on Dragon ground from C3, ready here.
Pause.
C3, I've got you 5x5. How many?
Got you the same, thank you.
So I don't want to speculate too much, but when you pull the umbilical away, you know, there's an opportunity for the comm system to just need to be re-verified. So we heard Josh check back in.
Those connection points, they're grouped together, right? You've got comm and air flowing into the suit at the same connection point.
Correct.
Also giving a check to Anas, or maybe just doing some zipping up and rechecking. We've had some social media questions coming in. We've asked you to participate, and we want to do that right now by asking questions of our expert astronaut, Bob Behnken, here. Of course, you can hit us up at hashtag AskNASA on Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, and Twitch. And our question is, coming in from Andy Hughes 01, why do the new spacesuits involve long rubber boots? Those are high boots.
You know, it's a great question, Daryl, as to why the SpaceX suit looks the way that it does. Of course, as a commercial company, they were free to come up with a suit that really then had to be assessed whether it actually accomplished the mission of protecting the crew, and in those unlikely cases where there might need to be an atmosphere of their own because there was something wrong with the one inside of the spaceship. And so SpaceX chose the high boot configuration there, but it met the mission needs, and so the NASA team was able to embrace it and move forward.
All right, we'll keep an eye on the action inside Crew Dragon Endurance and our three astronauts and one cosmonaut who are standing by. The member of the closeout crew has exited
Dragon
the capsule.
SpaceX, we got a report from the closeout lead about verifying all the zippers and umbilicals. We're just chatting with a few more folks to see if there's any other actions we want to take at this time. We do have 15 minutes remaining in the margin here, so plenty of time.
Okay, Dragon copies. Thank you.
All right, there you heard the discussion between SpaceX and the NASA astronauts. And so, although going into space is not child's play, every Dragon astronaut crew brings a stuffed toy with them, and there's one inside the capsule right now. We're going to step away from this part of the operation. Of course, we'll keep an eye on it, make sure that nothing happens that we don't make you aware of while they're working on that. But we want to take a little lighter moment, right, and look at the stuffed toys that are inside the crew. We don't know what or at least most people don't know what's inside Crew-5's capsule at the moment, but it has a purpose. When the toy starts floating, the strapped-in crew has confirmation they've reached microgravity. The toy is called a zero-G indicator, and there's been a half dozen or so on Dragon so far, starting with this little guy who can forget plush Earth, floating around by himself on the first uncrewed test flight in 2017 called Demo 1. And that's Anne McLean there. She was the one that received it. And that was followed up by a sequin-bedazzled dinosaur named Tremor, picked out by those fellows right there, Bob and Doug Hurley's son Jack, and Bob's son Theo. Crew 1 then took a toy baby Grogu with them to the first 4-person crew when they reached space. But since then, well, it's been all stuffed animals. A penguin for Crew 2, and a turtle for Crew 3, and a turtle and a chimp for Crew 4, as you can see there. And so right here on set, Bob was kind enough to bring Tremor with him that you saw floating around in his capsule. This is actually Tremor, the one that went up into space.
That's true, Daryl. This is the actual Tremor. It's got the tether still installed, if you will, that we use to keep track of it so that it didn't get lost on board the space station or float too far away.
SpaceX for suit leak checks.
There they go, starting up the suit leak checks again.
Go ahead, Mike.
All right, Josh, that completes the troubleshooting actions we wanted to take. So we verified that your umbilical has been reseated and your zippers are closed. Given that, we are recommending that you proceed back to Section 3 of 4.100 and reperform the suit leak check preparation and suit leak checks. I'll copy.
Okay, Dragon copies. We're going to step into Section 3 of 4.100, and we'll let you know when we're ready to reperform the suit leak checks.
Good readback.
All right, so they're going to recheck those suits. And while they do that really quickly, how did your son choose a bedazzled, sequined dinosaur for?
Well, Daryl, you know, there's never no telling what goes through the minds of two young elementary school boys, my son Theo and Doug's son Jack. But they had a collection, and dinosaurs were near and dear to their hearts. They went through the collections that they had in front of them, and they picked the Apatosaurus Tremor. And so I'm glad that some other folks have been able to follow along with that tradition and be able to excite a couple of kids, if you will, about, you know, flying in space, even if it's for a stuffed animal.
It's great to inspire the younger generations about space with something that they can access. And can you confirm that all the sequins are still there?
I can confirm, and I do know that the teams look really closely at each of the zero-G indicators to make sure that they're compatible with the SpaceX Crew Dragon's environment as well as the space station environment. And so we got approval, and we were able to take the Apatosaurus Tremor with us into space.
That's a neat thing, and it lives now in the Benkin household. Crew-5 is the latest launch by Kennedy's Commercial Crew program. And
Dragon, care is complete in step 3.9. We are ready for the checks.
Copy that, Dragon. You are go for Section 4 suit leak check.
All right, while they start up the suit.
Please go for suit leak check.
The communication confirming they're going to restart the suit leak check. Bob Benkin telling me that the suits inflate just a little bit as they make that check. In the meantime, we'll take an interview now and check in with Kennedy's Commercial Crew program. It was created in 2011 and has been flying astronauts from American soil to the International Space Station for the last 2 years. Let's bring in NASA's Megan Cruz, who's with Kennedy Center Director Janet Petro.
I am, Daryl. Thank you so much, Janet. It's always so great to have you here, especially for a day like today. You know, we're about to launch this new crew to the ISS. How do you feel about Kennedy again playing this important role in continuing what we do on the space station?
Well, thank you so much, Megan, for the question. And as you know, Kennedy has a very long history of doing really some incredible things. And of course, we were established 60 years ago to do the incredible mission of landing a man on the moon and then returning him safely. And in the 6 decades since then, we've been doing an incredible amount of impactful missions. And a lot of those missions have really helped what we do here on Earth and for the benefit of mankind here on Earth. That on-orbiting laboratory that we have up there is doing incredible science and technology and research that's really benefiting humankind here.
Yeah, talk to us about some of the things that we've been able to change and impact here on Earth because we're launching and because of what we're doing here at Kennedy.
Yeah, so it's incredible to think that 24 years ago was the first section, the module of the International Space Station called Unity, which was launched. And in that time, since then, we've had more than 20 years of a human continuous presence on the International Space Station. And every single time we launch a vehicle, whether it's a cargo or crew, we send up science and cargo and payloads where we do science research and technology development. And all of that not only benefits what we do here on Earth, promoting technology and bettering our life here, but also helps us to look forward to when we go back to the moon and then on to Mars. I'll talk about a few projects that we do here at Kennedy that I'm really proud of. One is the M-Solo. It's a commercial off-the-shelf mass spectrometer that'll help us seek out and search for ice on the lunar surface.
Wow.
And then, of course, we are the experts resident here at Kennedy for plant biology. And as we're going to be sending our astronauts further and further into space, to the moon and then on to Mars, they're going to want some fresh food. And so that plant research is really going to help enable that to happen.
Yeah, and of course you're alluding to Artemis 1. Right behind us is the iconic vehicle assembly building. Inside there is our Artemis 1 moon rocket. How excited are you for launch later this year, and just excited for again, Kennedy's role in deep space exploration?
Yeah, it's an incredible honor to be here leading this center for that really, really historic mission coming up. And of course, Ian threw us a curveball, and so we had, we made the right decision and went back into the VAB. But the energy around the center and even across the whole Space Coast is still very palpable. Looking forward to that launch. And when it goes, boy, it's going to really rock the entire Space Coast. And as I said, it's
and
going to be
copy
very,
that,
very
Dragon. We saw the same
we are
with
all
4
eagerly looking
suits all
forward to that
passing their
first
leak
mission,
checks,
which is
even
then
though
going to
seat 3 is
help
still in
us
the same
going
family.
on to the
That
moon
is
and then on to Mars.
Janet, thank you so much. And we actually just heard a call out there
So at
where
this time,
they're
we are going
completing
to proceed with the count and move into Section 5 for side hatch closure and delay any other troubleshooting steps until we get on orbit. How copy?
Okay, that's great news. Dragon copies, and we are going to continue into Section 3 of 4.100. Sorry, Section 5 of 4.100.
Janet, thank you so much. So sorry about that. We did want to take a pause so that people can hear again the operational loops that we're listening into. But thank you so much, and I hope to be watching Artemis 1 with you soon.
Thank you very much, Megan, and go Crew-5.
Perfect. Janet, thank you so much. Back to you, Daryl and Bob.
Bye-bye.
All right. Thank you, Megan and Janet. And as we were watching the crew there, we saw their suits inflate. We saw that pressurization happen, and then you heard a report out. And if you could just recap that for me, Bob.
Yeah, I think the team saw similar indications, but it was 4 good leak checks with similar performance from all 3 suits, or all 4 suits that they saw during that first leak check that they accomplished today inside the capsule. So they're going to continue with the launch count, and any further troubleshooting will be delayed until they're on orbit. So we're ready to continue with the count.
And so up next, you can see there is the closure of the hatch. And the closeout team will begin performing that. There they are. The hatch is above the entryway into Dragon. They'll remove the environmental conditioning hoses. They'll document that seal and put that on their mobile pads and move through the process.
I always think of things like hatch closure as closing the door and it's done in an instant. But closure of the hatch on a spacecraft is done very carefully with a lot of meticulous steps to ensure that that environmental seal is just pristine and they are going to get a good seal when they close it up.
You had the tech go over it and back into the spacecraft, so double check on that. They also document the seal. You'll see one of the techs take pictures all the way around the seal.
And we could think some about that hatch being closed, and then it'll be reopened when they come back at the end of their mission after splashdown, and when the vehicle's brought on board the ship. So it's going to stay closed for a long time after they get it closed for the spacecraft launch.
That's a great point. So it needs to be closed well.
Dragon, closeout team is taking final steps in preparation for side hatch closure. Stand by for transition to pad hatch closed. Ensure that all items are secure from now through launch.
And what is that, Bob?
It's just a protective piece of
Dragon copies. All
to make sure no FOD or anything falls down into that area.
Pad hatch closed.
Good words.
So some protective equipment for the seal there
Correct.
on the spacecraft. All right, very good. We'll keep watching the action and tracking the progress as we head down towards launch. T-minus 1 hour and 50 minutes until liftoff of Crew-5. I want to head on out to Megan Cruz, who is with our NASA administrator, Bill Nelson.
Yeah, it's our honor to have you here, Administrator. Thank you so much. I want to talk to you about how we've had this continued presence on the ISS for 22 years. What do you think of that legacy?
Isn't it something?
Yeah.
Think of the 3,000 investigations that we have done, scientific things, and the innumerable things that we've actually discovered doing all of this science on the International Space Station. Of course, it helps us train our astronauts as we get ready to go fly to the moon, and then we're going to go to Mars.
It's such a unique and awesome platform. So yeah, the fact that we can have this continued presence is so great. And you know, Crew-5 is this first mission to resume integrated crew flights to the space station with Roscosmos. Integrated crews have always been the norm on the space station, right?
That's right, because we built the space station together, now with 15 nations, particularly with the Russians. There's a Russian segment on the station. They provide the propulsion. We, the U.S., provides the electricity. So for the safety of all the crew, as well as the operation of the station, we need both there. Now, particularly with regard to safety, if there were a problem, for example, with one of our ability to get to Earth, say we had a medical emergency and had to get somebody to Earth, you need that integrated crew so we can still operate both parts of the space station. So safety is a big reason for us.
Yeah, and you know, we are launching today with the help of SpaceX. What do you think about the fact that we've had such a wonderful cadence with SpaceX these last 2 years with the commercial crew program?
Well, SpaceX has been excellent to work with, and the proof's in the pudding. As a matter of fact, what's happening at the Cape is just unbelievable. Last night there was an Atlas launch. Today we're launching Crew to the station. Tomorrow they're going to launch 2 communication satellites, all within the span of 3 days.
Yeah.
So it's incredible. But SpaceX has really been inventive, creative. They've been a good partner for NASA, and it shows that this commercial public-private partnership is actually working.
Yeah, and now as we're under 2 minutes to launch of Crew-5, what do you have to say to the crew? Any message for them?
Well, not only go Dragon, go NASA, but Godspeed.
And 2 hours to launch. I misspoke. I'm too excited.
You are.
Administrator, thank you so much. I appreciate you being here again.
Thanks.
And we'll check it back in with our partners at JSC now.
Thanks, Megan. And when Crew-5 arrives at the space station tomorrow evening, they'll officially become Expedition 68 flight engineers. Once on board, they'll do something known as a direct handover, basically saying that Crew-4 and Crew-5 will be on board the station together until Crew-4 comes home next week. Crew-4 will be able to give Crew-5 an orientation and show them the ropes, which will be particularly helpful for first-time space flyers Nicole Mann, Josh Cassada, and Anna Kikina. A direct handover also helps ensure continuous U.S. presence on the space station, a record we've held almost 22 years. The space station is an orbiting laboratory, and they will jump right into research and investigations. Now I'll toss it over to Daryl at the Kennedy Space Center with a little bit more of that science. Daryl?
Absolutely. Thank you very much, Shaniqua. And we continue to monitor the closure of the hatch on the Crew Dragon. You see the closeout team there. I want to take a closer look now at some of the life-changing science the astronauts are performing aboard the International Space Station.
The International Space Station is a state-of-the-art microgravity laboratory that is unlocking discoveries not possible on Earth and helping us push farther into deep space.
Every single day, we are answering big questions about Earth and about space, about where we came from and about where we're going. But the other thing that we're doing is we're learning more questions to ask.
Microgravity turns almost everything we know upside down. Liquids behave completely differently. Fire burns in new ways. Biological systems reveal surprises.
There's a few things that have made me gasp out loud up on board Space Station. Watching heart cells actually beat has been a pretty big one.
We're studying ways to grow food in microgravity.
I gotta tell you, these are pretty amazing.
We're learning how human bodies react to life in space and how to keep crew members safe and strong on long-duration exploration missions.
Didn't have a lot of science on your flight, but when you got up there was a lot of science to do, right? Even a backlog.
Absolutely, Daryl. You know, for my launch guest, even though it was a test flight that we were headed to the space station to check out a new vehicle, my T-shirt said, "Because science." And that was the reason that we were going. And I was proud to be a part of when I arrived at the space station, of the science that we were able to accomplish. As you mentioned, there was a bit of a backlog. We had a single U.S. crew member, and Doug and I were put into service right away, trying to support getting the science program back up and running and back at full speed.
Working hard on that science, just like our next guest who is joining us now. We have Mike Roberts here with us. He is the chief scientist for the ISS National Laboratory. Mike, thank you so much for being here with us today. It's a beautiful day to launch and a good day to talk about some of the science that's on board. You got currently, as I understand, 235 investigations on board. 76 of them are new, and you got a little bit of them flying right on this rocket here behind us.
Yeah, it certainly is a beautiful day here today, and we look forward to getting the science off the ground. As Bob indicated, it's a very busy time up in orbit for the crew because they are very busy not only maintaining the science portfolio of NASA so that we can continue to live and operate in space, they're also conducting science in space that benefits us here directly on Earth, and that's an important part of why the ISS National Laboratory exists.
What is some of the science that Crew-5 is working on?
So as the crew goes up today and docks the station, they're going to be engaged in a lot of research that addresses medical needs here on Earth. We have partnerships with the National Institutes of Health through the National Center for Advancing Translational Sciences, which is doing some very important research that leverages the access to persistent microgravity dead environment. As Bob, I'm sure, experienced in the microgravity environment, your body's physiology adapts to that environment in different ways, and in some cases, those effects of microgravity on the body mimic the onset and progression of disease and aging here on Earth. So the National Institutes of Health is taking advantage of that by sending small cells in tiny bioreactors up to space to understand how those individual systems respond to that environment so that we can design more effective therapeutics for use here on Earth. We also have experiments launching on Crew-5 going up with the crew today that are going to explore the effects of microgravity on the gut microbiome. A company is involved with Los Alamos National Laboratory, so it's another collaboration between ISS National Lab, Los Alamos National Lab, and its partners to better understand how microgravity impacts the gut microbiome and the human body.
microgravity, certainly an impact on astronauts the entire time they're out there. And we've been studying this for so long, and it's great to see a study that's looking at those internal functions of the gut. It'll be fascinating to see what comes of that. As we truck along here, I understand that we now have science on board the actual Crew-5 vehicle. That's not something that's always been capable of happening, right?
We do. For ISS National Lab and all of the sponsors, the International Space Station, the availability of extra crew members going up on commercial crew has been a significant advantage. We've doubled the amount of time that's available for crew to conduct science, but also we have the ability to utilize the crew vehicles to get some science up there that can fit within the confines that's not occupied by the crew. So while most of our science and supplies still go up on the commercial resupply vehicles, we're also able to utilize the vehicles themselves that are taking the crew up to get some expedited science up and get it back.
And we're looking at some video now of Lambda Vision. If you could tell me a little bit about that.
Another very important development in space is the utilization of space and access for commercial companies. So Lambda Vision is a small startup biotechnology company that is pioneering the use of bacterial rhodopsin, a protein from bacteria, that can be used to manufacture artificial retinas. So Lambda Vision is utilizing the absence of microgravity to improve their ability to manufacture these artificial retinas in space. These artificial retinas, when they're approved for use by the FDA, will enable Lambda Vision to offer the availability to recover from retinitis pigmentosa and macular degeneration here on Earth. Currently, there are no effective therapies for that recover full sight or full vision.
How about that?
This technology offers that advantage.
Offering a lot of hope for people who suffer from those diseases, and so it'll be exciting to see what kind of results come from that experiment.
It is, and Lambda Vision's had the opportunity through ISS National Lab and NASA to operate 4 different experiments in space. So this new era of easy access to space for supportive science that benefits here on Earth is really turning into some new great dividends for people on Earth.
Mike Roberts, Chief Scientist for the ISS National Laboratory, thanks for being here and sharing your knowledge about the science on board the ISS.
Thanks, Daryl.
All right, as we continue to watch the operation and our team check through the milestones here, we will toss it back out to Houston. Actually, we're going to throw it to California and Hawthorne, where Sandra and Jesse are standing by.
Thanks, Daryl. Earlier, we did talk about the progress that both NASA and SpaceX have made in human spaceflight since we first started flying Dragon regularly over 10 years ago. So to support our increasing number of human spaceflight missions, your spacesuit team has been busy at work, Jesse.
Yes, we have. You might be surprised to know that the completion of the Crew-5 suits marks SpaceX's 50th completed IVA, or intravehicular activity suit, including development, training, and qualification suits. 30 of those suits were created for flight. This number is inclusive of the suits that the Crew-5 astronauts are wearing today. 17 of the 50 were built and used for development and training. 1 was used to get our suit qualified for space, and we produced suits to support the passengers for a couple demonstration missions as well. You may recall Starman and Ripley. Starman flew on our first Falcon Heavy flight in 2018 and is still flying around out in space. And Ripley was the anthropomorphic test device that flew on Demo 1 to help us collect lots of data before flying Bob and Doug.
And as a reminder, this spacesuit that you've seen the crew wearing throughout operations today is an intravehicular activity suit designed for use inside Dragon. Its primary function is to protect the crew in the event of a cabin depressurization. Now, when the astronauts move onto the International Space Station following docking, the spacesuits will stay on board Dragon. The astronauts will then use NASA's Extravehicular Activity, or EVA, suit when outside of the International Space Station performing spacewalks.
The suit teams work tirelessly to make sure all of our astronauts have a positive experience while wearing our spacesuits and ensures the highest level of safety. Now, similar to how we innovate and further develop our launch vehicles with each tester mission, our spacesuits have continued to evolve since NASA astronauts Bob Behnken and Doug Hurley first donned them for Demo 2. Some improvements include the patterning process for better fit. Patterns are the individual pieces of fabric that go together to create the suit. Our process involves taking measurements, generating patterns based on those measurements for each layer of the suit, and then performing fit checks where we put together non-flight, quick versions of the different layers of the suit to make sure that they fit correctly before making the flight suit. Now, we've also continued custom patterns for each crew member and have made significant reliability upgrades in the spacesuits.
And while the suit is a single piece, which means the helmet, gloves, and boots all remain attached as one piece, with us today is a SpaceX helmet lent to us by the spacesuit team, and you can see it here on the table right now.
That's right, Sandra. This helmet is made from 3D printed nylon and has a visor that pivots open.
And Dragon SpaceX for side hatch leak checks.
Go for Dragon.
Okay, Josh, we identified a potential piece of FOD on the side hatch seal when we were inspecting everything, so the closeout team is proceeding to open the hatch to address that before closing and re-performing the leak check. For big picture awareness, we still have approximately 12 minutes remaining in the margin for this timer to perform this action, so we'll be able to run through everything without issue here.
Okay, Dragon copies will be opening up the side hatch and taking a look at the pod. We've got 12 minutes of margin. Appreciate the heads up.
Good readback.
So we just got an update. We were closing the hatch. It sounds like they do need to do another inspection, reopen the hatch, re-inspect the hatch lining to make sure that there's no FOD caught in there, and then perform the procedure to reclose the hatch one more time. It sounds like we do have some margin, 12 minutes of margin, so we are still on track for liftoff today. But as we were mentioning, the helmet is made from 3D printed nylon and has a visor that pivots open. It's also equipped with a microphone, which is embedded into the helmet, which allows the crew to communicate with the mission operators while suited and seated in Dragon.
That's right, and those communication systems that you were talking about, you can see inside. They're not inside this helmet because it's not going to be used throughout the mission, but the crew does have the ability to hear via the helmet, and you can see the slots right there for that capability.
Yeah. And so now we're going to check in with Kate while the team is working on the hatch. So Kate, how's it going over there?
Thanks, Jesse. Yeah, it's super cool to see that helmet up close. Now turning our attention back to the progress with the integrated launch teams, we are coming up on T-minus 1 hour and 32 minutes. As we just heard a couple of moments ago, the closeout team identified a little bit of FOD in that hatch seal. So basically the process is we close the side hatch, we inflate the seal around the hatch to a certain pressure, and then we hold that pressure to see if there's any decay or leak. And if there is, that's an indication that something is in the seal, and that's what occurred today. So the team is in the process of reopening the hatch. They'll clean the seal out, close it, and inflate the seal and re-perform that leak check. So normal, as we heard mentioned, we do have 12 minutes of margin in the launch countdown, as I've mentioned before. The countdown is to make sure that everybody is, all the integrated launch teams are aligned, and we do build margin in order to make sure that we can deal with things like this as they come up, similar to whenever pilot Josh Cassida had a little bit of decay, or excuse me, not decay, a lower pressure value read on his suit, so we rechecked the suit pressure there as well. So working through those, no issues. We're still tracking for launch today, and as you can see, the crew seated there comfortably in the capsule. It looks like Anna might be taking a little pre-launch nap. I don't know if I personally would be able to pull that off, so I really admire the calmness that she's demonstrating today. So once that hatch is closed back up and we successfully leak check on that, we should be good to go. We see some movement there. She's not napping. As for the launch engineers, they are located in Firing Room 4 in the NASA Launch Control Center at Kennedy Space Center. They have a view through their large windows of Pad 39A, which is located just 5 kilometers east of them. Currently, the Falcon 9 team is loading helium and nitrogen gas into storage bottles on the launch vehicle. You see on your screen Firing Room 4 there now. RF checkouts are now also complete, and the final review of vehicle testing performed earlier today is underway. So the SpaceX chief engineer, who for this mission is Dan Alex, he will check in with the team at T-minus 80 minutes to verify that we are good to continue with the countdown. Now, the next major activity, we will flow a small amount of fuel into the first stage to prime those Merlin 1D engines for ignition. The team is also monitoring fuel and liquid oxygen loading preparations, ensuring that the propellants in the ground tanks are correctly chilled to prior to loading them onto Falcon 9. Propellant load will begin at T-minus 35 minutes. Now at just under T-minus 1 hour and 30 minutes ourselves, the weather continues to be green. As you can see, beautiful clear day at pad 39A, but we are of course monitoring weather at downrange as well, and that continues to look good, and the range remains green and ready to support. So all that being said, we are on track to launch in under an hour and a half from now, and we are certainly getting excited here in Hawthorne. With that, let's turn it back over to Daryl and Bob at Kennedy Space Center. How's it going over there, guys?
All right, thank you very much, Kate, and we continue to monitor the work that the closeout team is doing right there, rechecking the seal to Dragon between the hatch and the spacecraft. And there you can see the techs making that inspection now, taking a light around it. They had the hatch closed but reopened it after doing the side hatch leak check. And Bob, it was interesting, we were talking about this just briefly before Kate threw to us, and there's a way they can check that seal to see if there's any FOD in it. And I thought it was interesting how they do that.
Yes, Daryl, Kate gave a great explanation of that process just a couple minutes ago, but what they do is they need to find a way, of course, before you get into space to make sure that the integrity of that seal is good. And so what they do is they're able to inflate a small portion, a small volume, to ensure that they do have a good pressurization on the sides of that seal. And if they do have a leak or some indication that things aren't exactly right, the most likely culprit is some sort of foreign object that's kind of captured in that sealing surface. And so the team goes back in, cleans that area out, and then we'll kind of reaccomplish that leak check to make sure that it's good before the crew gets into the vacuum of space with the spacecraft.
And you can see they've wrapped up that process of inspecting, cleaning, and documenting the seal, and now they've reclosed the side hatch to Crew Dragon with our Crew-5 astronauts inside, and they'll start sealing up the hatch now. We'll keep monitoring the action and let you know what's going on.
And Dragon, for a quick update, the closeout team was able to open the side hatch and remove the hair that they identified as FOD. They've closed the side hatch and are stepping into their leak checks right now. We are right on schedule for launch today.
Dragon copies, that's great news, and we're standing by for that leak check. Thanks.
Okay, well, there you heard confirmation that they found what it was. And real quick, Bob, before we throw it to an interview, a hair was identified. Fascinating to me that something as small as hair can actually compromise a seal.
Yes, it's really important that area is super pristine, and like we talked about a little bit earlier, that hatch is going to be closed for 6 months as they make their way into orbit, and then won't get open until they come back and are on aboard the recovery ship.
Ground is going to be commencing a health check for launch escape system a second time. Expect a momentary flight computer state change, followed by that transition back to pad hatch closed.
Dragon copies, we'll expect it again prior to going back to pad hatch closed.
Good readback.
We will keep monitoring the action here outside the Dragon spacecraft. You heard the launch escape system checks are coming up momentarily as they continue to secure the side hatch. In the meantime, let's go out to Megan Cruz, who has a very special guest, Lieutenant General Thomas Stafford, one of the 24 astronauts we sent to the moon. Megan.
Yes, Daryl, I'm very excited to have the Lieutenant General here with me today. I mean, it's just, I'm so honored to be sitting next to you here. I wanted to ask you, is this your first crewed launch that you've seen?
Oh, no, Megan. I was here before when we had commercial launch number 2. So always just love to see a launch.
Absolutely.
Having done 4 missions,
Yeah. I mean, does being here, does it make you kind of reminisce on those 4 missions you've had? You know, you're part of the Gemini and Apollo programs, and we actually have some pictures of you from those missions that we'd love to share with everyone. Can you talk us through what this picture is?
Here we are right after we've landed on Gemini 9. That was in June the 6th, 1966. There's Gene Cernan, my pilot. He's the first one to walk in space completely around the world. We did 3 different rendezvous on that. And we also touched down closer than any Gemini or Apollo.
Wow.
So,
and then we have another picture, actually. This one's from Apollo 10, right? And that's you, the second astronaut farthest from the transport van, right?
Right. So that was a great mission. It was the first lunar module to the moon. And I did the first. We were too heavy to land, or we might have had a chance to be the first ones to land on the moon. But we were too heavy to land, but we went down to 9 miles above the lunar surface. Photo mapped, radar mapped, and visually mapped, picked out an ellipse that had 3 potential landing sites. He did that twice and came up and did the first rendezvous around the moon.
Yeah.
And then on the way back set the all-time world speed record.
This picture's a little blurry, but it's honestly my favorite of the 3 pictures. Can you tell us what's happening here? You guys are on your way to the moon here, right?
We're on our way to the moon. We're walking slow to the transfer van. But then on the way back, we were doing 24,791 miles an hour, or Mach 36 miles per second, making 7 miles a second.
Wow.
So that record still stands.
Wow. You know, we're talking about the Apollo 10 mission and the work that you guys were able to establish to get us where we are today with our Artemis 1 moon rocket right behind us in the vehicle assembly building. Are you looking forward to the Artemis 1 launch later this year?
Oh, absolutely. I worked on helping getting that through Congress back in 2010. That's the authorization that authorized it. So I've had 12 years of work on that one.
Yes. Lieutenant General, thank you so much for being here, and I hope you enjoy the Crew-5 launch today.
Well, it's great to be here. The weather's good, and I'm sure you're going to have a great launch.
Thank you so much. All right, Darren, we'll send it back to you.
Well, that was fantastic to hear from the Lieutenant General.
Loud and clear. Stand by from comm check by launch control. Dragon, launch control on countdown 1, comm check.
Launch control, Dragon, loud and clear.
Launch control, loud and clear. Stand by for comm check by the chief engineer.
We're getting comm check
Dragon
right
CE on countdown 1, comm check.
Listening in.
CE, Dragon, loud and clear.
CE, loud and clear. Also, this completes the Falcon 9 responsible engineer comm checks.
There will be a series of these checks. Establishing a number of communication paths to the crew from launch control. Want to just update you really quick. We got a good side hatch leak check. Again, a good side hatch leak check after some FOD was found that compromised it following the first closure. Teams went back in, opened the hatch, cleaned off the seal, shut the hatch back, rechecked the seal, and we are good to go. Again, good side hatch leak check, and we're moving forward now with the comm checks. The SpaceX team working quickly. They had 12 minutes of margin. They whittled that down to about 3 or 4 minutes. So great job by them. Tackling that issue that can pop up as you're preparing to launch a spacecraft to the International Space Station. There's the Falcon 9 rocket on the pad with the Dragon spacecraft atop. We've got a beautiful day. Nice skies above. Take a little moment to listen to a special message now from somebody who's familiar to both of us, more him than me. Our previous co-host from the last Crew mission, Crew-4, and the launch broadcast. A very special person to all of us here. Let's take a listen.
Hello, husband. It looks like you're doing a great job with the launch commentary. Keep up the great work. It seems like all those tips that I gave you are paying off. A couple of things I forgot to mention, though. You should probably share some of your snacks with Daryl because he does get a little hangry if he doesn't get enough to eat. And also, it's important as the co-host to make sure you laugh and smile at all of his jokes. It makes him feel really good. Actually, there's a couple other people in the family that want to say hello to you as well. Just give me 1 second.
Do a good job, Daddy, or else I will find new ways to motivate you.
In all seriousness, though, Nicole and Josh and Koichi and Anna, I want to wish you well on your journey. You guys have worked so hard to get here. You're going to be absolutely outstanding on the International Space Station. I cannot wait to see you up there. We're going to be cheering you on from down here. Have a blast, and we'll see you when you get home.
What a beautiful message. She's so good with the camera and giving the message. Thank you so much to Megan MacArthur for saying that. By the way, I've taken care of myself. I've got my food here. But it's so good to see her, and you're a little touched by her message.
No, it was absolutely great to see my wife, of course, our dog Shadow, who arrived in our family after we returned from the Demo 2 mission. You know, my son requested
Dragon
approval.
SpaceX, we just had a good side hatch leak check.
My son requested approval
Dragon copy. That is great news.
to have a dog when the mission was accomplished, and so that was pretty cool to have the dog included. And of course, Darth Vader making a guest appearance, not something that I expected, but that costume has a little bit of history. We surprised Megan during the mission on board her time on Space Station with that costume, and surprisingly, she found one on board Space Station to surprise us right back.
How about that? And he's using the dark side of the Force at the moment. He's motivate an answer out of you.
He may have heard that line from both his mother and myself as we try to work through elementary school.
Well, a nice moment there. Thank you, Megan, for doing that, and I'll make sure Bob laughs at my jokes, or maybe I need to just tell better jokes. That's what it is. Hey, we want to catch you up on the action. We did have some FOD that was found in the seal in the side hatch, and that was removed. The SpaceX team working quickly to get that removed and cleared. They resealed the hatch and repressurized it, and we have confirmation just heard minutes ago of a good side leak hatch check, and so the team is moving forward. The beautiful shot of Dragon as we look out over the Atlantic. We've got some social media questions, and we asked you to submit them. We've had a little action that we've been dealing with this morning, so haven't been able to do a whole lot of questions, but we're going to start getting to them now. And @Con asks, what kind of personal items can the crew take with them to the International Space Station?
No, Daryl, it's a great question, and one that we get asked often. What kind of personal items can the crew take with them? Usually it's something small is probably the best answer to that question, but they're items that are personal mementos of family members or otherwise. You saw my son earlier in the Darth Vader costume. As you can tell, Star Wars has a special place in our family, and so we were able to glue together a small Lego ship and have my wife take that into space. I took one during my mission as well, so that we would have something that he could connect with that was part of our family, something to talk about, during our family conferences. There are many small items with individuals that you want to make a personal connections with that typically the crew will take with them. They also may take something that's special to them that allows them to either remember Earth or take advantage of a hobby that they have, whether it's a guitar or other musical instrument, small items like that.
It must be nice to have that connection back to Earth and your family because of, you're up there in space, and especially now with these long-duration space missions lasting 6 months. And it's interesting, you mentioned the small effects. Commander Nicole Mann taking her wedding rings, but also some surprise special gifts for her family, and a dream catcher that her mother made for her when she was a child. That's aboard her personal effects, which you get about 3.3 pounds of personal effects, as you mentioned. So a nice cultural memento, part of her heritage as a Native American, the first Native American woman to go to space. Let's check back now with California and toss it out to Hawthorne with Sandra and Jesse. Ladies?
Thanks, Daryl. We are just 1 hour and a little over 15 minutes from launch, and it is getting more and more exciting as we get to that T0. The crew has already ingressed the Dragon vehicle. They were helped out by our closeout team. Umbilicals were attached to their suits, which provides breathing air and comms to Dragon. Suit leak checks were completed, as well as comms checks completed with the core and the launch director. And after those suit leak checks, the closeout team was able to close and seal the hatch. We just got confirmation that we did have a good leak check. During the first round of closing the hatch, they did find a piece of FOD. It was a piece of hair. We were able to open it back up, remove the FOD, and close the hatch, and then completed that seal check. And now the closeout team is just wrapping up. And once they wrap up in that white room, they will depart the white room, and those final weather checks will be coming up soon, which will be necessary before a final go, no go. And there you can see the closeout team there on your screen. Again, just wrapping up the final procedures for hatch closure there. So let's check back in with Houston for a status on the team supporting the space station on their readiness for launch. Shaniqua, how's it going?
Thanks, Jesse. The team here in Mission Control Houston has polled that they are go for the launch. The International Space Station and its onboard crew are ready for Crew-5 astronauts to lift off. When Flight Director Greg Whitney polled his team, he was asking the flight controllers who work on all the different systems on board the space station if their focus areas were online and working properly. This includes life support systems, proper communication links, computers that allow us to command the station on board and their subsystems, and our ability to maneuver the space station are fully functional. The crew in orbit is awake and just finished their midday meals. They will start crew arrival preparations shortly, making sure they are ready to receive the new crew tomorrow. Mission Control Houston will continue monitoring the mission as we check off milestones for today's flight. In the meantime, I'll send it back over to Hawthorne. The International Space Station Flight Control Room is ready for launch. Sandra?
Thanks, Shaniqua. That's great news. And while Crew-5 is launching today, just a few months ago, we were launching another crew to the International Space Station. That is, of course, Crew-4, who launched in April. The Crew-4 astronauts currently on board the International Space Station have spent nearly 6 months conducting scientific research in areas such as materials science, health technologies, and plant science to prepare for human exploration beyond low Earth orbit and to benefit life on Earth. Such research also lays the groundwork for future exploration of the Moon and Mars, starting with the agency's Artemis missions.
Dr. Chow Lingren was born in Taipei, Taiwan, but spent most of his childhood overseas in England. He was an instructor and jump master with the U.S. Air Force Academy and also has a doctorate in medicine and served as a NASA flight surgeon. After he was chosen as an astronaut, Lingren flew on Soyuz and spent 141 days in space during Expedition 44 and 45. He has a wife and 3 children and is the commander of Dragon Freedom.
And up next is fellow airman Bob Hines. He was born in Fayetteville, North Carolina, and has a wife and 3 daughters. He has a Master of Science in Aerospace Engineering and served 21 years in the U.S. Air Force as a test pilot and as a fighter pilot in the F-15E. He came to NASA as a research pilot where he flew science missions in the WB-57. He's the pilot for NASA's SpaceX Crew-4 mission, which has been his first space flight.
Now, there's a couple mission specialists on board Crew-4, one of which is Jessica Watkins, who considers Lafayette, Colorado her hometown. A talented rugby player in college, her team won the national championship in 2008. Watkins was a postdoctoral fellow in the Division of Geological and Planetary Sciences at the California Institute of Technology. She completed several internships with NASA, including one testing system designs for the Mars Perseverance mission at JPL. She became an astronaut in 2017, and just like Bob, Crew-4 was her first flight to space.
And the second mission specialist is Samantha Cristoforetti. She was born in Milan, Italy, but now lives in Cologne, Germany with her partner and 2 children. In 2006, she earned her fighter pilot wings and flew the AMX attack fighter at a base in Italy. In 2013, Cristoforetti launched into space aboard a Soyuz for a long-duration spaceflight to the International Space Station. And several years later, she was awarded the Knight Grand Cross of the Order of Merit from the President of Italy. Crew-4 was her second spaceflight. This 4-person crew is currently preparing for Crew-5's arrival and also their return back to Earth just days from now.
And while Crew-4 was on board, they received a visit from another Dragon. SpaceX's 25th resupply mission to the International Space Station launched on July 14th, carrying over 5,800 pounds of science, research, hardware, and other crew supplies to the orbiting laboratory. Dragon stayed on station for a little over a month before being packed with critical research and hardware to be analyzed after a safe splashdown off the coast of Florida on August 20th. Now let's head over to Daryl at Kennedy Space Center. Daryl, how are you guys doing over there?
Well, thank you, Jesse and Sandra. Well, we're having a beautiful day here at the Kennedy Space Center. You can see behind us, we're at the Launch Complex 39, where media are gathering, getting ready to count down the final hour as we get ready to watch Crew-5 launch into space. It is a big day, and especially here at the Kennedy Space Center, where we have just been cranking out the launches, Bob. 3 launches in 3 days from 3 different pads. We had the Atlas V going off from 40 yesterday. We've got Crew-5, of course, from Launch Complex 39A today, and then tomorrow, SpaceX launching from their other launch pad, Pad 41. It's hopping.
Outstanding to see all that action down here at the Kennedy Space Center. And again, it's a beautiful day. I'm looking forward to seeing the Crew-5 folks get into orbit.
Indeed, and liftoff time is still holding for noon Eastern time, 56 seconds after noon, if you want to be right on the second. We're also tracking no issues at the moment with Falcon 9 or Dragon. We did have an additional suit leak check that we performed, as well as a spacecraft leak check. Those are good to go. Dragon now good to go. The range is green, and of course the weather is doing fabulous here at the Kennedy Space Center. Downrange, they're watching some winds in the abort corridor, but they're looking good right now. And so the crew of Crew-5, talking about Commander Nicole Mann, pilot Josh Cassada, and mission specialists Koichi Wakata and Anna Kikina, well, they donned their spacesuits in the historic crew quarters suit-up room this morning. They woke up around 4:30 a.m., donned those suits around 7 a.m. They walked out of the crew quarters building as every NASA astronaut has done since Apollo 7. And then they were transported to the pad, where they climbed inside the SpaceX Dragon Endurance for its second flight. Now we are seeing them live while they await liftoff. Bob, you lived this with your fellow astronaut, Doug Hurley. What is the crew doing right now at this moment?
You know, Daryl, it's a good question at this point. I think you can see on the camera that what the crew's really focused on right now is relaxing. You know, they've had a hectic morning, if you will, one that's very well scripted, one that's very well controlled, but one that causes them to need to be on schedule through all the individual milestones leading up to launch. That part's behind them now, and they're taking a chance to relax and catch their breath before the tanking operations begin here in just a few minutes.
Indeed, tanking coming up, as well as the launch escape system checkout and the arming that will follow. The rocket is on the pad, ready to go. And over the next hour, we will conduct a series of polls to get ready for launch. The crew will also, as I mentioned, will be arming that launch escape system, and then the fueling of Falcon 9 will begin. Let's talk a little bit about the details of today's flight. Launch, of course, as we mentioned, set for just a few seconds after noon, a little more than an hour from now, and then Crew-5 astronauts will race towards space, reaching orbit in about 12 minutes. That's followed by a roughly 29-hour flight to dock with the International Space Station, one of the longer transit times to the ISS. And then that docking will happen at 4:57 p.m. Eastern Time tomorrow. Of course, we'll have coverage of that. A quick history of NASA's Commercial Crew program. It all began with the first successful and historic test flight
Dragon
of
SpaceX. The closeout team has departed the crew arm, and with that, ground is going to cycle the orbit tank isolation valves to equalize low flow pressure.
Dragon copy.
All right, they're cycling the valve there, and as well, closeout team is now departing that location that you see, 39A. They'll be making their way off the pad. That'll lead us into getting ready to fuel the rocket. Of course, I was talking about the historic test flight for my partner here and co-host, Bob Benkin. His crewmate, Doug Hurley. Together they flew the mission that was called Demo 2. And after Bob and Doug returned, of course, NASA was certified with SpaceX to fly astronauts regularly to and from the International Space Station. And of course, that led to the regular rotational missions that we see today, the 5th rotational mission to the International Space Station. Let's check in now with Kate Tice in California.
Thanks, Daryl. Quick status update for those that have recently tuned in. We've had a smooth countdown so far today. You can see there on your screen, our 4 Crew-5 astronauts have ingressed. They are in their seats. Their 5-point safety harness is buckled in, and they are looking relaxed and ready to go. They ingressed about an hour and 45 minutes ago, and the teams have completed the required comm checks, the suit leak checks, the side hatch closure, and its associated leak check. We did have to redo that leak check as a piece of FOD was found in the seal, so we opened the hatch back up, cleared out the seal, cleaned it, and then closed the hatch again and reperformed that leak check, and we got good leak check there. And we heard just moments ago that the closeout team is beginning to depart the pad, and at that point in time it'll just be the Crew-5 astronauts left on the pad once the closeout team departs the BDA. At this point in time, I'm happy to report that the SpaceX team is working no issues, and the pace is certainly beginning to pick up. As for Falcon 9, our 2-stage reusable rocket, final propulsion checkouts of the first and second stages and the engine began a few minutes ago in preparation for propellant loading. This involves testing and cycling valves and engine pneumatics pressurization. At T-minus 45 minutes, the team will report their readiness for prop load with a final electronic go, no-go poll. Again, that prop load will begin at T-minus 35 minutes. As for Dragon, before we can start loading propellant on Falcon 9, we still have a few Dragon-related tasks to perform. First, we need to retract the crew access arm away from the Dragon capsule. We can see it there, currently connecting the crew tower to the capsule. We will need to retract that access arm away to its launch position. That will happen between T-minus 44 and 42 minutes, so shortly coming up. That will be the last physical change to the crew tower. With the access arm out of the way, the launch escape system will then be armed. Once those two events are complete, Dragon will be ready for Falcon propellant loading. We did hear earlier in one of the pre-launch briefs that once the launch escape system is armed, we will not have the ability to recycle. So we are basically locked in for launch today as soon as we have that launch system armed. As for weather, we will also verify with the launch weather officer that all the weather meets all of the associated constraints, including items such as wind speed, lightning, and precipitation. Looks like with those beautiful blue sky behind Falcon and barely any clouds, we don't think rain is going to be an issue, nor lightning. Now, we do expect acceptable weather conditions for launch, both at surface level and upper altitudes. As I mentioned earlier, we have been watching those downrange winds, and they continue to trend favorably. So everything green there. As for the range, currently clear for launch from historic launch pad 39A, the worldwide network of ground stations and the tracking and data relay satellites, or TDRS as you hear us refer to it as. Those are ready to support Dragon as it heads into orbit. Today we have an instantaneous launch window at 12 p.m. Eastern, noon on the dot. Once we begin loading propellant, there is no opportunity to change that T0. The timing for Dragon to rendezvous with the International Space Station is incredibly precise, down to the very second. So we only get one chance at it today. But at good news, at T-minus 1 hour on the dot and counting, we are go for launch.
And we are now less than 1 hour until liftoff. This day is
Dragon,
the continue.
you are go for section 6. When ready, report go for launch.
Dragon copies. We're stepping into section 6, 4.100, preparation for LES Army.
Good readback.
So again, we are now less than 1 hour until liftoff, and this day is the continuation of regular crew flights to this space station from U.S. soil. SpaceX's Crew-5 mission will be the company's 6th crewed spaceflight for NASA, following the crewed test flight Demo 2 and 4 previous operational crewed missions to the International Space Station. It will also be SpaceX's 8th crewed spaceflight overall, including the private orbital mission Inspiration 4.
Today, our crew is flying on board Dragon Endurance. It will be the second flight for this capsule, and it will be taking a ride on a brand new Falcon 9. Now, it's been a great countdown so far. Weather, as Kate has been updating us with, is still good for T0, so the excitement just continues to pick up here as we get closer to that T0.
SpaceX Dragon in section 6, Crew-5 is go for launch.
Copy that, Nicole. Crew-5 is go for launch.
And you just heard it yourself, Crew-5 is go for launch. Another exciting milestone. We did start our coverage earlier today with the crew heading to the launch pad. And prior to that, the SpaceX team did help the crew put on their spacesuits and conduct initial checkouts before crew walkout. Crew walkout was where Nicole Mann, Josh Cassada, Koichi Wakata, and Anya Kikina gave final goodbyes with friends and family gathered outside the operations and checkout building before they began that roughly 20-minute ride to pad 39A.
And we were able to watch the crew as they boarded their Teslas and headed down the NASA Causeway, headed towards the launch pad. And once they arrived at the pad, the crew took a moment to enjoy the view of the vehicle as that they will be taking flight on this afternoon, and then headed up the fixed service structure to begin a process known as crew ingress, where the astronauts entered the Dragon spacecraft. The SpaceX team then performed a series of checks to ensure the suits, seats, and vehicle interactions were all functioning properly.
And a short time ago, the team did close out Dragon's hatch, and the crew is safely inside. So with less than an hour to go until liftoff, things will continue to pick up as we get close to the go, no-go pole to arm the launch escape system and begin propellant loading.
The crew poll for readiness was completed at the T-minus 60-minute mark, and the Dragon poll for prop load is coming up here at T-minus 55 minutes. After that, at T-minus 45 minutes, will be an internal mission control Hawthorne poll, and then the launch director's poll for propellant loading. When we get to about T-minus 40 minutes, the crew access arm will retract, and the crew will get the call to close their visors and to arm the launch escape system. Now, this is the automated safety system in place that can fire the 8 Super Draco thrusters on Dragon to quickly separate the crew from the rocket, either on the pad or during the flight on the ride uphill.
And then once we reach about T-minus 35 minutes, propellant loading for the Falcon 9 will begin. So we did hear that the crew is go for launch. Great news. So with that, let's send it back to the team in Florida. Megan?
Great news, guys. So yeah, now I'm joined with Brian Onyate, but I'm going to have him say his title because I think I'm going to mess it up. So you say what you are.
Sure. Good morning. Yeah, I'm the Chief of the Utilization and Life Sciences Office here at Kennedy Space Center.
Yeah, it was a little long. I was like, I'm going to have him say it.
Yep, long title.
So I wanted to talk to you about how NASA has been studying plant growth and microgravity for many years now. So tell us about the 2 experiments that Crew-5 is going to be working on while they're on station.
Sure. We have 2 experiments going up. One is more of a plant research experiment. We call it Plant Habitat 03. It will be going into the advanced plant habitat. And actually, that plant experiment is doing a generational study. So as you can see, that's the advanced plant habitat. And those the plant that is growing in there is called Arabidopsis. It's our model plant. And basically, we're going to grow that and get it all the way to seed. And the study is basically getting those seeds, bringing them back, and then reflying those seeds to see what happens. So what's interesting is...
And the second picture, right, that we have, that's how you capture the seeds.
Yeah, that's how we capture the seeds. What's interesting about those seeds, they're actually the size of pepper. So imagine the pepper that you put on your food, very tiny, very small. So we had to actually develop these capture bags to grab those seeds. So what we're noticing is in a previous experiment, the DNA of the plant actually changed, and it almost seemed like it was trying to protect itself from the environment of space, the harsh environment that's up there. So what we want to study is, can we actually grab those seeds, and will those seeds remember that environment? So when we fly the second generation, will they kind of have a leg up? Will they go already kind of pre-programmed to protect themselves? So that way the plants will thrive in space.
That's interesting. Yeah. Why is that something that you wanted to see? What can we learn from that or use?
Yeah, so what we can do is for exploration with NASA, obviously we want to get to the orbiting station around the moon one day, or the surface, or the transit vehicle, or Mars. How can we better prepare the plants that we send, or the crops that we send up there, so that they actually are ready to go, they'll thrive, and we understand what's happening so that the crew can actually consume something great. So.
Always forward thinking here at
always
NASA.
Forward
We're
thinking.
great.
Yeah, always forward thinking.
Well, let's talk about the second experiment. That one's called Veg-05, and we have some props here to kind of walk people through that,
Yeah,
right?
we do, yeah. So Veg-05, it's actually, we're growing dwarf tomato plants, and we're going to put them in this, what we call here is a plant pillow. What's interesting, it's actually made out of Kevlar, so exactly what police use in their police vests, so I guess they might be bulletproof plant pillows, but yeah, so these plant pillows, it's just basically how do we hold the soil, how do we put the fertilizer and the seed in there in order for us to grow the plants.
Because they would just fly around on the space station.
They would just fly around on the space station. So we have a little, what we call a quick disconnect here. This is where we apply the water. So once we apply the water in there, we have to keep watering it like here on Earth, and just let the plants grow and let them thrive in space. So,
and you mentioned the fertilizer.
Yep, the fertilizer and the arsenite. So what you see there on the right there is the arsenite, which is actually clay chips, right? It's the soil that basically allows the water to be absorbed and allows the plants, roots to kind of grow in there and grab water and nutrients. The second there that you see there is a fertilizer, and it's a slow release fertilizer. So when we add water into it, it kind of dissolves little by little, and it provides the food that the plants need so that they can grow.
Okay, so why is this important for us on space, but also here on Earth, to learn about this particular experiment?
Sure, both of these experiments are important. One is obviously for exploration, we want to make sure that the seeds that we send, the plants that we grow, will thrive, right? So how can we make them excel in space, right? And the second piece with Veg-05, which we find interesting, is how can we actually give food for the crew to eat on orbit, right?
Sure.
So healthy, nutritious food. This is actually going to be our second flowering plant that we grow in space, which is awesome. So they'll grow up there, they'll have to pollinate, you know, and the crew members might have to be our space bees. You know, we don't have bees up there to help us pollinate, so they might have to, you know, help with pollination. They'll grow, and then hopefully they'll get some nutritious fresh food up there. And the benefit, what I find interesting here for Earth is there's a lot of things that we learn with ISS. ISS is basically a laboratory or another test tool. So we really want to see what data can we gather from growing up there. So when we bring it down to Earth, if we're in a stressful environment or another environment that is challenging, what did we learn up there so we can actually grow better crops here on Earth?
I love hearing about the science, Brian. Thank you so much for sharing that with us.
No problem. Sounds great. Thank you.
We'll send it back to you guys.
Megan and Brian, and throughout the show we've been taking your hashtag Ask NASA questions from social media. We have time for a few more that have been coming in, and we appreciate those questions coming in. If you want to submit one, it's hashtag Ask NASA on our streaming channels, NASA Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, and Twitch. The question is from Aditi on YouTube. He asked Bob Binken, how was the launch experience different on Space Shuttle and Crew Dragon? Was one better than the other?
No, it's a great question, Daryl. We often get asked which vehicle is better, which one we love the most. And from my perspective, I loved them both. You know, I had a great opportunity to fly and build space station with the space shuttle, but then rotate as a crew member with the Dragon on a modern spacecraft. You know, that was a really neat aspect to see something that was kind of built in the 21st century versus something that was built, you know, in almost the middle of the 20th century. If you look back at the technology that was on board the shuttle, just super excited to have an opportunity to fly on such a cool modern new ship.
And now, next question at Mike Mangano. I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly. Asked, and this is a fitting question for you, Bob. Did the NASA astronauts who fly the Dragon capsule help in the design of the capsule? Why, yes, they did, and that was you.
You know, it was an interesting experience, I think, for both Doug and I to have the opportunity to not only fly on a new spacecraft, but be a part of shaping it for crews to come forward. And I think as we went through that process, the SpaceX team really learned how to work with us and how to take our inputs and incorporate them into design whenever they could, and explain to us when they couldn't, because everything that we wanted they couldn't necessarily do. But we were able to compromise and come up with good solutions so that years later, maybe in Crew-5's case, you know, they wouldn't be cursing Bob and Doug's name as to what they had agreed to or said was acceptable when the time came. We wanted to have opportunities for them to have choices. We included the opportunity to write on paper, but also to have a tablet, you know, so that crews, as they went forward with their missions, would be able to find the place that, you know, helped them be as successful as they could be. And so I'm hopeful that there just aren't too many curses associated with Bob and Doug, and it's mostly, you know, hey, those guys, they were thinking when they did this. So.
And we've had good results so far with 4 launches and the 5th today. Our next question comes from @morearts.com. If the astronaut schedule shifts during docking activities, does their schedule shift later in the day or the next morning? You know, we do know that the ISS crew is sleep shifting in order to accommodate this crew.
It's true, Daryl, that the crew actually has to sleep shift to accommodate the schedules of the vehicle traffic that arrives on board the space station. There are even times when the vehicle arrives a few minutes early or a few minutes late, and the crew needs to be ready for that as well. And so the crew does shift their day around to support all the operational activities, not only vehicle traffic and arrivals, but a spacewalk may impact things, or other activities that are happening on the ground, for example, might drive a schedule to be specific as well. But the crew's given time to recover after each of those sleep shifts.
Very good. And for those watching, if you want to ask a question of Bob Behnken, just follow us on Twitter @NASA Social, or check us out on the web at nasa.gov/social. Thanks for answering those questions, Bob. Great job. Let's send it now back out to Kate at SpaceX for an update on the countdown. Kate?
Always love hearing those responses from any astronaut, but especially Bob, because he flew on our DM2 mission a couple years ago. So at this point in time, we're now under an hour. We're at T-minus 48 minutes, and the SpaceX launch team is finishing the final review of data from checkouts of Falcon 9 over the last hour. The launch director has verified with the launch weather officer that weather meets propellant loading constraints. So next up will be to poll the team for readiness, both for propellant load and for launch. This will be the last poll before liftoff. The 7 SpaceX responsible engineers, often called REs, indicate that they are go by electronically voting on the online countdown procedure. The launch director, or LD, as you hear it called on the nets, also checks with the Dragon mission director, or MD, and the NASA launch manager to make sure that they are also ready. Earlier, you saw the vehicle assembly building called the VAB. The Falcon and Dragon launch team, as well as key NASA launch members, are in the Launch Control Center adjacent to the VAB. They have a view straight toward Pad 39A through the large windows of Firing Room 4. Now there on screen, you can see the Dragon capsule on the right-hand side. The crew access arm is still in the service position. I've recently heard that the closeout team has departed the tower, and they are in the process of departing the blast danger area. Now, with the crew on board Dragon waiting for next instructions, which will be to stow the crew arm for launch, and the crew arm sequence will be armed and initiated. We should get a good view of the access arm as it
Station
swings.
operators on countdown. Polling is complete. The team has pulled go for crew access arm retract, LES arm, propellant load, and launch. For all operators in MCCX and Firing Room 4, both control rooms will go into lockdown at T-minus 45 minutes and will remain in that state until launch skip system is disarmed. All operators are to remain at their console and maintain a sterile cockpit until MD confirms successful disarming of the launch escape system following orbit insertion or propellant offload in the event of a scrub. For non-urgent no-go conditions, brief the CE or LD, and they will approve aborting the countdown. For urgent issues affecting the safety of the operation, operators shall call hold, 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 and countdown net. Launch control will abort the launch auto sequence and immediately proceed into launch abort. At T-minus 10 seconds, launch control will be hands-off, relying on automated abort criteria for the remainder of the count. Operators advise the launch director whether structural breakup or fire is imminent or occurring per Dragon manual escape flight rules. Launch control at this time may proceed with arming the crew arm for movement.
Launch control copies, proceeding to arm crew arm for movement.
All right, quick recap there. All really good news. It sounds like the final poll has been conducted and all of the responsible engineers polled go, as well as the range they polled ready for launch, and the NASA team, the NASA launch team is also ready for launch. So everything continuing to look good. We just heard there that the crew arm, the crew access arm will be armed for retraction, meaning it will move away from the Dragon
crew
capsule.
Access arm retraction started.
All right, and there we should get a view of that crew access arm now moving away from Dragon capsule. Again, this will swing out into its launch position. This is the final change to the crew access arm, to the crew tower. Of course, the transporter erector will move away from the rocket as it lifts off and just shortly before liftoff. So that, in fact, will be the last major physical change that we see to the pad. But this crew access arm retraction is the final, will be the final state for the access arm for launch. This retraction should take about a minute to complete. Now, as I mentioned before, the range continues to be go for launch, monitoring the clearance area around the launch pad, as well as air and sea space around the flight corridor. And of course, here at Kennedy Space Center, as you see on your screen, the conditions are gorgeous. Everything continues to be acceptable for launch. Many things go into consideration, such as ground winds, any rain that might be in the area, as well as potential for lightning, any thick clouds, and of course, as I mentioned before, downrange landing zones. We have mentioned before that we've been tracking those, but everything continues to look green for launch. At this point in time, everything is looking on time for our liftoff at noon Eastern. We can see that crew access arm continuing to retract. Pretty cool shot there from inside the arm on the right-hand side of your screen as we see Dragon slowly move out of the frame. So with all that being said, the teams are ready. We will begin the propellant load at T-minus 35 minutes, and we are getting excited here at SpaceX headquarters. The energy is definitely starting to pick up outside of mission control. But with that, let's hand it off to Daryl to check in back over there at Kennedy Space Center.
All right, thank you, Kate. And back here on the lawn and the host desk, looking out at what one of my coworkers called a picnic vibe, with the media and NASA social folks all joined here to watch Crew-5 launch in just
crew
about
access
42
arm
minutes.
retraction complete.
And there you heard confirmation that crew access arm has fully retracted from the rocket. A gorgeous shot there from our flight operations team here at the Kennedy Space Center, a helicopter encircling the pad right now to give you that view. Great job, fellas. T-minus 42 minutes and counting as we zip around Launch Complex 39A. The background, the launch tower for Dragon, and in the foreground, a Starship launch tower under construction. Up next, we're looking at the launch escape system getting ready to arm, and of course that comes right before we start loading propellant. We're expecting to hear those call-outs in just a bit. On a beautiful bluebird day at the Kennedy Space Center. Our Crew-5 is in their seats at the very top of that rocket, inside the capsule Endurance, making its second flight. There they are, from left to right. Cosmonaut Anna Kikina, Josh Cassada, Nicole Mann, and Koichi Wakata.
And Daryl, they're getting into position to begin their procedure that'll have them arming that launch escape system that you mentioned. They'll be able to hear some clicking of valves and follow along on their display screen as once they've kicked off that procedure, as the vehicle kind of catches up and completes that arming sequence. And as you know, once the fueling operations begin, the crew has to be ready to potentially launch somewhere if there was some sort of a problem. And so that launch escape system needs to be in place and armed in preparation for that fueling operation to begin. That system will stay armed throughout the ascent phase until the crew is actually safely in orbit, allowing them a safe way to escape from the Falcon 9 rocket should there be any sort of a problem with the vehicle.
And we're expecting to see the astronauts close their visors and arm the launch escape system that you just talked about, Bob, here in a little over a minute. We'll get the call out from the launch team.
You'll also see them ensure that their feet are in the appropriate locked-in position, their straps are tight, because again, should that system be required, they might be going for a pretty significant dynamic ride. But of course, we don't expect that to happen today, but they'll have that system in place just in case as the appropriate safety measure.
Now, Bob, that launch escape system, powered by Super Draco engines, capable of moving Dragon a half a mile in just 7.5 seconds, which is equivalent to a peak velocity of 436 miles per hour. I know you know this system well. You were very much briefed and very aware of its capabilities. You want to be able to not only get off the launch pad, but also get off the rocket while in flight. So it's got to move fast.
Absolutely, Daryl. And for shuttle systems, the crew would really have to do a lot of manual activities to steer the vehicle through the appropriate escape or abort scenarios, as we talked about them in those days. But this system is highly automated, and the crew primarily follows along with its operations.
Dragon, you are go for Section 7 of 4.100 to close visors and arm the launch escape system.
SpaceX Dragon copies stepping into Section 7. All crew visors are closed. We are arming the launch escape system.
SpaceX copies all.
That's Commander Nicole Mann reporting back and confirming their visors are closed and they are ready to arm the launch escape system.
And you can see the crew members pulling their straps and ensuring that they are buckled in, because from a crew perspective, that relaxation period that I talked about earlier is now over.
Yeah, it's all business now. Want to make sure that you're in your seat firm and tight for the operation of fueling.
This is also the part of the operation that starts to be a little bit different than training. You really can't capture the tones.
This is MD on countdown 1. Launch escape system is verified armed.
All right, we got the verification of the armed escape system.
So from a training perspective, the sounds and things that the crew will hear during the loading operation are just different than they're able to capture from a training perspective. And so now's when it starts to, again, be a little bit different from a crew perspective.
There's no simulating that system.
There is some acoustics that they tried to capture.
Falcon 9 tanks will be venting for the start of prop load. Expect loud venting.
That they tried to capture with the Demo 1 audio, if you will. But as you heard in the comm that just came through there, you need to get reminded to expect loud venting during some of the operations. And these are new things from a crew perspective that you've been briefed on, but now you're going to hear them for the first time.
3 of the 4 crew members inside that capsule right now have never flown to space before. They are first-time flyers. The lone exception, Koichi Wakata, was a veteran with JAXA, and he's getting ready to embark on his 5th flight to space. And as we wait for the next mark,
You know, the crew's experience, whether it's a space shuttle or a Soyuz or the Dragon vehicle or Starliner or Artemis, as we move towards that, these experiences are all slightly different. And so I'm excited to hear, you know, Koichi's discussion as he tries to balance and describe all three of them side by side when he gets back from this mission.
Would love to hear him talk about the comparisons. There's only a few astronauts like him, right, that have been able to fly on all three vehicles.
Yes, and as we go forward here with the Artemis missions coming forward, I'm excited to have folks compare and contrast their Orion experience, their SLS experience with Falcon 9 or our other rockets.
That's going to be fun. Just a few seconds now, and we're awaiting the confirmation to the beginning of loading propellant into the Falcon 9 rocket. A beautiful shot there as we encircle the launch pad. Just a few more seconds until that call out.
Propellant loading has started.
And so it begins. The loading of propellant aboard the Falcon 9 rocket, liquid oxygen and RP1. Got your propellant and your oxidizer, which blended together make quite the combustion. Millions of pounds of thrust to get Crew-5 into space.
You know, there are a lot of details to that operation, Daryl, with each of the stages, and as you mentioned, the oxidizer and the fuel both needing to be loaded, and so the crew will follow along with that carefully as the loading operation commences. If there was any reason for them to need to stop that operation, the crew would expect that propellant loading to kind of be backed out and reversed, and so they'll want to understand the state of that fueling operation going forward, just in case they had to back out of it.
And we've got a social question now from @GrantB117, who asks, how long does it take to complete the fueling operations?
You know, it's a great question, Daryl, and they started it at 35 minutes because that's really prior to liftoff, because that's how long it takes for the loading operations to kind of get executed. The crew goes through the process, the ground team, of loading that propellant, ensuring that they get the proper commodities on board. The actual sequencing of things might be affected a little bit by the temperature on a given day, but they have that process well monitored, and they begin at 35 minutes because that's how long it takes to get the rocket all fueled up.
Thank you for answering those questions, and to you out there for asking the questions. Keep them coming. #AskNASA on our various social platforms. And again, now that fueling for Falcon 9 has started, that means the 8 Super Draco engines inside Crew Dragon are ready, if needed, to launch the capsule away from Falcon 9 in an instant, should there be any kind of emergency associated with the rocket or the pad. The NASA and SpaceX teams have trained extensively for exactly that type of contingency. And so now let's go over to Kate Tice at SpaceX headquarters in Hawthorne for another operations update. Kate?
Thanks, Daryl. You can probably tell by the background noise that things are starting to get more exciting now that we're just practically 30 minutes away from launch of Crew-5, certainly counting down the final minutes. Everything's still looking good for Falcon 9 and Dragon. With that launch escape system now armed, we are heading for an on-time launch just 32 minutes from now. As you saw, Falcon 9 propellant load began right on time at T-minus 35 minutes. The first and second stages of Falcon 9 are each loaded with 2 liquid propellants. One is fuel, which is loaded into a tank at the bottom of each stage, and the other is an oxidizer, and that's loaded into a tank at the top of each stage. The fuel that we use to power the Merlin engines is a refined kerosene referred to as RP1, or Rocket Propellant 1. The oxidizer loaded on each stage is a densified liquid oxygen, or LOX. Densified means that it's kept much colder than typical for launch vehicles, and it takes up less volume. And as such, this allows for more oxidizer to be loaded into the first and second stages. Now, to ignite the fuel and oxidizer in the Merlin rocket engine, we use an ignition fluid called TTEP. When T-Tub comes into contact with oxygen, it burns, giving off a green-colored flame. Once we have that flame going, we add in the kerosene fuel to the Merlin chamber, and the engine ramps up to full power. You might actually be able to see that green flash just as the second stage engine ignites following stage separation, which is expected to happen about 2 minutes and 48 seconds into flight. Right now, we're topping off helium into pressure vessels on both stages. This is used to pressurize tanks in flight as propellant is pulled out of those tanks by the Merlin turbo pumps. Now, on board the spacecraft, the astronauts are monitoring systems from their crew monitors.
Stage 1 cryo-helium loading has started.
All right, there we just heard that the cryo-helium load has begun. Again, that is going into those pressure vessels that I mentioned earlier. Now, the crew training simulator has included playback of the sounds that were recorded in a previous Dragon capsule during recent flights. So all of the pops and the hisses that the vehicle puts out, all the crew has heard those before, though not live. So they are prepared for all the noises, the extra noises that they're now hearing. As for the range, continues to report no problems. They are go to support launch. Weather also clearly looking great. I think we're actually seeing even fewer clouds than we were about 20 minutes ago. We had a less than 10% chance or probability of violation of our weather constraints, also known as a POV. So that's really good. That is for the launch site conditions. We are also tracking downrange weather conditions as well as launch sites around the world in the unlikely event that Dragon needs to escape. Now, as a reminder, today we have an instantaneous launch time because we're heading to the International Space Station. So at this point in time, if we hear a hold for any reason, we will have to stand down and target our backup launch opportunity, which is tomorrow, just under 24 hours from today's planned launch. At this point in time, at just under T-minus 30 minutes till launch, let's turn it back over to Jesse and Sandra for an overview of what's to come until liftoff.
Great. Thanks, Kate. Always great to hear that we've got good weather and it looks beautiful over there at KSC. For Crew-5, the astronauts' flight to station will take about 29 hours.
And as we await T0 in just about 28 minutes from now, the ground operations team is doing a series of system checks to make sure both Dragon and Falcon 9 are ready for launch. You're looking at a live view of our teams at the Cape as they prepare for liftoff. And as we wait for the launch clock to hit 0, we want to give you an overview of what the ascent portion of the mission will look like.
Now, once we hit T0 and a successful launch occurs, we will watch Falcon 9 and Dragon lift off from historic launch pad 39A and make their ascent.
About 50 seconds into flight, Falcon's 9 engines will throttle down to help pass through the period of maximum dynamic pressure on the rocket, or what we typically refer to as max Q. At this point in time, the vehicle will be going supersonic.
And once we're through the period of maximum dynamic pressure, we can throttle up our 9 Merlin engines again. From there, at about 2.5 minutes into flight, we have a series of 3 events that will happen in rapid succession.
The first is MECO, or main engine cutoff, and this is where all 9 Merlin 1D engines shut off in preparation for stage separation, which is, of course, our second event. This is where the first stage detaches from the second stage, and the first stage will make its way back to Earth for landing, while the second stage continues on its journey with the third event, which is SES-1, or second stage engine start number 1, and this is where the MVAC engine lights up and propels the second stage along with our Crew-5 astronauts to orbit.
As Stage 2 heads towards its targeted drop-off orbit, Stage 1 will execute 2 burns in order to make its way back down to Earth. The first is the entry burn, and that's where 3 of the 9 M1D engines will reignite and shut down, and this helps to slow the stage down in preparation for entry back into the Earth's atmosphere.
While the first stage is heading back to Earth, the second stage will cut off its 1 Merlin engine that was ignited right after stage separation. Once this happens, we will wait for confirmation of a good orbital insertion.
About 90 seconds after Dragon gets into orbit, Falcon 9 will land back on Earth. The landing burn is just a single engine burn, powerful enough to bring the vehicle's speed down rapidly in order to touch down on the drone ship at about 9.5 minutes into the mission.
While Falcon 9's first stage is landing, Dragon is preparing to separate from the second stage. About 3 minutes after the second stage gets into orbit, we should have a great view of Dragon with its 4-person crew drifting away from the second stage. Once Dragon is a short distance away, it will begin checking out its Draco maneuvering thrusters to make sure Dragon continues to increase separation distance from the second stage. And it is worth noting that these are not the Super Draco engines that would be used during an abort scenario.
About 40 seconds after separation, Dragon's nose cone deploy sequence will begin. It will take roughly 4 minutes for the nose cone hooks to unlatch and open, exposing its guidance navigation controls that will help Dragon autonomously fly to the space station.
And lastly, once the nose cone is deployed, the remaining Draco thrusters on the forward bulkhead will be checked. From there, over the next...
Stage 2 cryohelium loading has started.
From there, over the next 29 hours, Dragon will be in its rendezvous and approach phases, undergoing a number of phasing burns as it makes its way back to station. All that will be coming up soon, but for now, let's check back in with Shaniqua in Mission Control Houston. Shaniqua?
Thanks, Sandra. The flight controllers here in Mission Control Houston are laser focused on the onboard systems of the space station, making sure it is ready to receive Dragon vehicle tomorrow. They're also making sure communication links between the station, Dragon, and the ground are working properly. The consensus right now is that everything is proceeding nominally. Teams here in Mission Control Houston, the teams in Hawthorne, and the astronauts aboard the space station will monitor the autonomous docking of the Dragon spacecraft tomorrow evening. They'll perform a series of leak checks, then work to open the hatches both on the Dragon side and inside the space station's pressurized mating adapter. We expect hatch opening to take place around an hour and a half after docking. And once aboard, the astronauts will be greeted by Station Commander Samantha Cristoforetti, and then the whole station crew will join in for welcoming remarks to the new crew members. Now, due to critical science, this welcoming remarks will be about 90 minutes after the crew is on board. Once on board, the crew members will no longer be referred to as Crew-5, but rather as flight engineers of the International Space Station. Here in Mission Control, Flight Director Greg Whitney is on console overseeing the team for launch, and he will be back tomorrow for docking. We'll be on air continuously through Crew-5's arrival, but live coverage of docking is expected tomorrow around 4:57 p.m. Eastern Time. That's it from now. From Mission Control Houston, I'll toss it back to the team in Florida. Daryl, how's it looking?
Well, it's wonderful out here, Shaniqua. Wish you could be here. We got picnic weather out here at the press site and Launch Complex 39, where we are looking out for the launch of Crew-5 from historic Launch Complex 39A, a beautiful sweeping shot of the lawn where we have our special guests. The media are here. We've got NASA social folks who are out on the lawn, and of course, me and Bob. Bob's riding shotgun here as we take our coverage to the next level at the final 23 minutes of liftoff. Now, from the countdown, rather. We are just seconds away from the 5th astronaut rotation mission to the International Space Station under NASA's Commercial Crew program. Commander Nicole Mann, pilot Josh Cassada, and mission specialist Koichi Wakata and Anna Kikina are strapped into their seats inside the Dragon Endurance at the very top of this rocket here. We are listening in to the communications as they talk live to the Falcon 9 team. The rocket is fueling. The operation is doing well. And the launch escape system is armed. Of course, that means Dragon is prepared to launch itself away from the Falcon 9 rocket in case of an emergency on the pad or after liftoff. So far, operations looking and sounding as expected. And we are counting down to our liftoff at just after noon, 12 p.m. and 57 seconds after the hour Eastern time. There was a 1-second adjustment. That's pretty typical as happens when we get to this stage of the mission. The mission is the continuation of rotational crew flights to the International Space Station from U.S. soil on private rockets and spacecraft. Of course, this would not have been possible without the success of the NASA SpaceX Demo 2 test flight now 2 years ago, and of course the safe delivery and return of Crews 1, 2, 3, and eventually here in about a week, Crew 4. Of course, we're happy to have the pilot from Demo 2, and that's Bob Binken. Appreciate you being here, but giving us some great thoughts and explanations about everything that's been happening.
Well, thank you, Daryl. I'm super excited to be here for Crew-5 and get a chance to relive my experience during the Demo 2 mission.
And it's been a great one so far. We've watched the crew get into the capsule. We've watched, they worked through a couple of issues early on, but those have been cleared. A suit leak check and a hatch leak check that had to be double checked. Now we're rolling along and moving towards liftoff. A couple things that are coming up as we count down. We're going to have stage 2 RP1 load complete. That's in 20 seconds. A few seconds later, we'll get strong back chill. That will begin in order to set the stage for the stage 2 liquid oxygen load. Of course, propellant's load is not an exact science, but once it completes, we'll hear that call out.
Stage 2 RP1 load is complete.
There you heard it. Let's talk a little bit about the crew. If you're just joining us, we have a 4-person crew that we call Crew-5, and it's commanded by Nicole Mann. She holds a Master of Science in Mechanical Engineering and is a colonel in the Marine Corps. She was an FA-18 Hornet and Super Hornet test pilot and deployed twice aboard aircraft carriers in support of combat operations in Iraq and Afghanistan. Nicole was selected by NASA in June of 2013, and in the years that followed, led the astronaut corps in the development of hardware for our Artemis program. Today, the Crew-5 commander will be flying into space for the first time, and once she reaches space, she will be the first Native American woman to stay on station. A historic first for NASA and for her.
Absolutely, Daryl. The astronaut corps is widely diverse, and I'm just proud to see Nicole join that crew on board the International Space Station.
With her is pilot Josh Cassada. He grew up in Bear Lake, Minnesota. A physicist and U.S. Navy test pilot, flew the P-3C and the P-8A, as well as 23 combat missions. He later became an instructor at the U.S. Naval Test Pilot School, which is a path to NASA for military officers. Cassada is one of more than 100 graduates who have become astronauts, going all the way back to the Mercury program. More recently, he served as capsule communicator and mission control, but today he is the pilot aboard Dragon.
It's a seat I know well, and I look forward to seeing Josh support Nicole and the rest of the crew on their way towards the International Space Station.
The mission specialist now, Koichi Wakata, he's the veteran, a Japanese astronaut who has a doctorate in aerospace engineering. In 1996, he became the first Japanese mission specialist aboard the Space Shuttle Endeavour for STS-72. Altogether, Koichi flew 4 Space Shuttle missions, a Roscosmos Soyuz, and was on a long-duration stay aboard the International Space Station. During his 2-decade career as an astronaut, Koichi has spent 11 months in space. Bob, you spent a fair amount of time in space yourself. It's great to have a veteran aboard.
It absolutely is, and in addition to being a veteran, Koichi just has a wonderful personality that I know is just it's key to kind of success on board the space station.
Our second mission specialist is Roscosmos cosmonaut Anna Kikina. She graduated from the Novosibirsk State Academy of Water Transport in 2006. In 2012, Anna officially became a candidate for the position of test cosmonaut. Crew-5 will be Anna's first flight into space, along with 2 of her other fellow astronauts. Now, each of these 4 crew members will be part of Expedition 68 once they arrive at the International Space Station. And there you see them there inside Crew Dragon Endurance, the second flight for this Dragon. I want to let you know, if you're here locally, you want to step outside and enjoy the launch, you got a small radio, you can pick us up on VHF radio frequency 146.940 on the megahertz scale, and on UHF radio frequency 444.925 megahertz FM mode. You can hear that all within Brevard County, right here on the beautiful Space Coast. And you can see the...
Stage 2 LOX load has started.
Just got the call out that the Stage 2 LOX load has started, putting that liquid propellant into the second stage. Let's check back in with Kate Tice and get an update from Hawthorne. Kate?
Thanks, Daryl. We are T-minus 16 minutes away from launch, and everything continues to look great for Falcon 9 and Dragon. Falcon 9 began prop load at T-minus 35 minutes. The loading of RP-1 fuel on the second stage is complete. That finished at T-minus 20 minutes. Fuel loading continues on the first stage. It is almost complete. That should be wrapping up here momentarily. Densified liquid oxygen loading is underway on both the first and second stages. Those look to be about 80% on the first stage and has only just recently begun on the second stage. So not much there yet. That will wrap up at T-minus 3 minutes and T-minus 2 minutes respectively. Now, as for checkouts of thrust vector controllers, what we call TVC wiggles, those are coming up. We basically check to make sure that the thrust vector controllers are able to actuate the engines themselves. That's what helps create gimbal for those engines, and gimbaling is actually how Falcon 9 steers itself. So those are coming up along with throttle valve checkouts on the engines. The Dragon mission director and team are currently reporting no issues, so really good on that front. Communication checkouts are complete. The crew access arm is retracted, as we can see there, and the crew is strapped in and ready to go, as you can see there on the right-hand side of your screen. Everybody continuing to monitor prop load there on their crew monitors. Now, final instructions to the crew come at T-minus 10 minutes. At that point, their crew displays will be configured for launch. This setup gives the crew insight into how the launch is proceeding and provides constant updates on vehicle health. At T-minus 5 minutes, we'll hear the call out that will be in terminal count, and at that point, Dragon will transition to internal power. We'll hear continued call outs on the countdown nets as we get closer to liftoff. As for range, they continue to be go, continuing to monitor the launch corridor, and everything remains green. As for weather, we're looking at 7-mile-per-hour winds at the launch site, and as I said before, as the countdown continues, we are seeing fewer and fewer clouds. Just an absolutely stunning day there at Kennedy Space Center. Let's check back in with Daryl to see the last couple minutes prior to liftoff.
Thanks, Kate, and it really couldn't be more perfect out here weather-wise for a launch. How about that, Bob?
It just looks absolutely stunning to look out and see the vehicle ready to go, the crew on board, strapped in. I'm just super excited for them.
And there's a view of the countdown clock and the historic American flag that has been standing there since the Space Shuttle program. Now you're looking at a pic of Crew-5. Crew-5 flying aboard the Dragon capsule Endurance, and the booster that you see behind them that they're posing with is a brand new one. Actually was damaged in transit from California to Texas, but it was fixed, repaired. The crew did a great job, the SpaceX team, in getting it all ready. And at the time that Falcon 9 launches Dragon to space, the International Space Station will be 260 statute miles over Australia. Crew-5 will then spend the next 21 hours with Mission Control Team that you see there in Houston, standing by, getting ready for the beginning of this mission. They'll spend 29 hours chasing down the International Space Station for a rendezvous at 4:57 p.m. Eastern Time tomorrow evening. One of the longer transits, Bob.
It's true. It's a little bit longer than usual, or average, I would say, as we work towards Crew-5. But as the launch dates shift around, that changes the time that you can actually arrive on Space Station. They've got plenty of consumables, so it should be fun to have some time in space.
And when they arrive tomorrow evening, we'll have live coverage on NASA TV of docking, as well as the Crew-5 welcome ceremony at 8:15 p.m. Eastern Time, 7:15 p.m. Central. And some final thoughts, Bob, as we get ready to watch Crew-5 launch into space.
You know, my opportunity to sit here and watch Crew-5 go has just been inspiring again to see another vehicle head towards the International Space Station. Again, I'm excited for them and just hopeful that Nicole, Josh, Koichi, and Anna have just a wonderful mission. I know that they've got a wonderful launch in front of them.
Absolutely, and that's what we're rooting for here. And so with T-minus 11 minutes and counting, we're going to spin our chairs around and watch the launch. But we're going to let Kate and the team focus on the pad as we proceed through the final stretch of the countdown. We'll turn it over to Kate Tice at SpaceX headquarters in California to take us through. Take it away, Kate.
Thanks, Daryl. As you can probably tell by the background noise, the crowd is definitely growing here at SpaceX headquarters in Hawthorne, California. Certainly one of our company traditions is to watch the launch itself from behind Mission Control, which you see there on your screen. You can see this is Mission Control Hawthorne, or as you sometimes hear referred to as MCCX. And then, of course, a crowd of employees watching from behind. I personally also stand there if I'm not doing the webcast, so I can confirm it's a great spot to watch launch. Like I said, as you can see, the energy is certainly starting to grow now that we're about to hit T-minus 10 minutes. Beautiful view there of Falcon 9 and Dragon on the pad, ready to take Crew-5 to space.
We did discuss
Dragon, SpaceX, confirm crew displays are configured for launch.
Welcome. We would like to give a huge thanks to the NASA and SpaceX team, the thousands of people for their development, preparation, and training in getting Endurance and Crew-5 to the launch pad today, and your continued support in helping to make this a successful mission. We look forward to joining the rest of our Expedition 68 crew members aboard the International Space Station. And a special thanks on behalf of all the crew to our family and friends. It is your love and support that help make dreams come true. Now let's do this. Crew-5 displays are configured for launch.
Copy. And Nicole, Josh, Koichi, and Anna, on behalf of the entire team at SpaceX, good luck, Godspeed, and enjoy the ride.
And those words from Nicole Mann, the first female commander of a Dragon, as she thanked the many folks that have helped get them to this point. We're now less than 9 minutes away from launch today. Upon liftoff, you'll hear a number and letter combinations which mark different abort zones throughout the flight, as well as some performance calls. The first two are 1A and 1B, and those signify the first stage and will last up to the very north tip of North Carolina. The next are 2A through 2E, and those will come into play once the second stage kicks in, lasting from the top of North Carolina all the way to the tip of Newfoundland in the northern Atlantic. You'll also hear a spot that is to be avoided, and you might hear Shannon or forward to Shannon, and that actually refers to Shannon, Ireland, meaning they would target off the east coast of Ireland if they were later in that second stage and did need to abort for some reason. So the next major milestone that we're looking towards will come just seconds from now, and that will be when engine chill begins on the first stage of the engine.
That's right. So engine chill is basically when we take a little bit of that super chilled densified liquid oxygen and we flow it through the turbopumps of the Merlin M1D engines on the first stage. This helps to prepare the turbopumps and avoid any thermal shock to the hardware when they see the full flow of liquid oxygen during ignition. We're also expecting the conclusion of prop load for the RP1 on first stage to wrap up at T-minus 6 minutes. LOX load continues to be underway on both first and second stages, again wrapping those at T-minus 3 minutes and 2 minutes.
And after that, we'll hear a number of call-outs related to Dragon's flight computer. Some will be
Stage 1 engine chill has started.
And you did just hear that call out that stage 1 engine chill has begun. Coming up in just about 45 seconds, we should expect to hear that RP1 load is complete. RP1 load is that densified kerosene or rocket fuel that will help propel the crew into orbit. All of that RP1 is loaded into the first stage, and we are standing by to hear that it was loaded into the second stage as well.
Again, we expect that to wrap at T-minus 6 minutes. The venting that you see on screen is totally normal. That is just some
Stage 1, RP1 load is complete.
Great news there that RP1 load is now finished. As I was saying, the venting that you see on the vehicle is totally normal. That's just some of the super chilled densified liquid oxygen just vaporizing as it comes into contact and vents from the vehicle.
And coming up, we'll also hear the call for Dragon to configure for terminal count, and then it will be transferred over to internal power, and then we'll hear that propellant tanks on Falcon 9 are getting ready to pressurize, which helps add some additional rigidity and structural support as we get ready for strong back retract.
That strong back will retract a couple of degrees at first, and then we will see it swing open completely just shortly or at the moment of
Falcon 9
liftoff.
tanks will be pressurizing for strong back retract.
And there's that indication that we are preparing for that strong back retraction.
Coming up in just a few seconds, we should hear that Dragon is in terminal count.
Dragon is in configure for terminal count.
All right, there we heard that call. Dragon onboard computers have now taken control of the vehicle. As I mentioned before, first stage LOX or liquid oxygen loading is underway and will wrap up at T-minus 3 minutes. The second stage will wrap its LOX load at T-minus 2 minutes. Launch teams continue to report no issues and everything remains green and for an on-time launch.
Retract has started.
And here in just a couple seconds, you might be able to see the strong back arm as it does begin to retract. As Kate said, it will recline 2 degrees.
We can just barely make out the clamp arms are now beginning to move. All right, now that those clamp arms are removed, as Andrew said, this will retract by 2 degrees, and then at liftoff, the strong back will retract another to 45 degrees, allowing Falcon 9 to clear. Strong back is part of the transporter erector, and the transporter erector is what provides the liquids and the gases and the electrical connections to the vehicle. It's also what we use to integrate the vehicle in its horizontal position, and we can see that 2-degree retraction just now complete.
And the next call out that we should hear in about 20 seconds is that the first stage LOX load is complete.
Stage 1 LOX load is complete.
And there we go, all of the oxidizer loaded on stage 1. Soon we'll hear that stage 2 LOX load is complete, and that will be the last propellant call out we'll hear today. Now less than 3 minutes until launch.
Dragon is in terminal count and is on internal power.
All right, there we heard the good news that Dragon is now on internal power. Again, the white clouds that you see there at the base of the Dragon trunk, totally normal. That's just the vapor from the liquid oxygen. Again, second stage now wrapping up its LOX load. Excuse me, first stage wrapping up its LOX load just a few minutes ago, and now moving toward wrap up of second stage LOX load, which will complete at T-minus 2 minutes.
Coming up on 2 minutes until liftoff, standing by for word that stage 2 LOX load has been completed.
Dragon is in auto idle.
Stage 2 LOX load is complete.
There we heard the call out. Falcon 9 is now completely fueled. All of its propellants. So
closeouts are starting. Expect loud ending.
All of its propellants, and we can see that leftover liquid oxygen now being vented or released, now flowing further away from the vehicle. So nearly 1 million pounds of liquid oxygen in RP1 now on board Falcon 9. It is fully loaded and ready for launch.
And coming up at T-minus 1 minute, we'll hear that Dragon is in countdown. Its flight computer will switch to countdown mode, and we'll hear that the flight termination system on Falcon 9 is armed.
STS is armed. Falcon 9 is in startup and is now controlling.
And there you heard it.
Dragon is in countdown.
Dragon's flight computer in countdown. The flight termination system now armed.
We should get the final go for launch from SpaceX launch director Mark Surtees.
Dragon, SpaceX. Godspeed. Go for launch.
SpaceX Dragon, go for launch.
SpaceX reports go. Crew reports go. 30 seconds until liftoff.
T-minus 15. 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Ignition. Engines full power. And liftoff. Stage 1 propulsion is nominal.
Vehicle is pitching downrange. Stage 1 propulsion is nominal.
We're now at T plus 35 seconds into the 5th rotational crew mission on board Dragon and Falcon 9.
Coming up in just a few seconds, we'll hear the call out for Stage 1 throttle down.
Stage 1 throttle down.
Falcon 9 engines throttling down to help pass through the period of maximum dynamic pressure.
This period is known as max Q, and once the vehicle... There we just heard that the vehicle is now traveling faster than the speed of sound. Once through max Q, we'll throttle those Merlin engines back up.
Max Q. Stage 1 throttle up. Stage 1 throttle.
Stage 1 Bravo.
Copy 1 Bravo.
That call out for 1 Bravo means we're in the second and final abort mode for the first stage, continuing to get good performance. The crew is already pulling over 2 Gs. And next up is going to be a couple of events in rapid succession. First will be engine chill on the second stage and back engine. And there you heard that call out. And then we'll have MECO, or main engine cutoff, where the 9 engines igniting will cut off in preparation for second stage separation. Then we'll see the single Merlin vacuum engine on the second stage ignite and continue to carry the Crew-5 astronauts to orbit.
Just like we did on first stage, that MVAC chill is intended to help pre-chill the hardware prior to the full flow of that densified liquid oxygen.
Stage 1 throttle down.
At this point in time, those 9 Merlin engines are beginning to throttle down in preparation for MECO, or main engine cutoff.
Standing by for MECO.
And MECO.
Stage 2 Alpha.
And MECO. Stage separation confirmed. Copy 2 Alpha.
There we should see that second engine begin to ignite now. And obviously confirmed by the loud cheer behind us here at Mission Control Hawthorne.
And we're also in 2 Alpha for the aborts if needed. Again, second stage is lit and continuing to carry the Crew-5 astronauts into orbit.
We're now getting a view of the first stage after that stage separation. The second stage still being illuminated by that single Merlin vacuum engine, and that's on the right-hand side of your screen. First stage on the left-hand side of your screen making its way back to Earth. We will be attempting to land it on our drone ship, which today we are using Just Read the Instructions.
Acquisition signal, Bermuda.
And we did hear that acquisition of the ground station in Bermuda. The first stage is continuing to make its way back to Earth, and the second stage is going to continue.
Trajectory nominal.
Another good call, trajectory nominal.
Confirmation there from Commander Nicole Mann. You can also sort of see the Space Coast there in the background of the first stage on the left-hand side of your screen. It also looks like you can actually see the